Hello, everyone, and welcome to episode 154 of ThROH The Years, the podcast that reviews Ring of Honor show by show from the beginning. My name is Trevor Dame, joined as always by the co-host Matt Feuerstein. And Matt, this is probably the holiday episode. Ooh, holidays, fun, whoopee. It's whatever you celebrate. Holidays. We'll talk about hot chocolate. I don't know.
Oh, you made me too excited. I want to do a whole podcast about hot chocolate. We got to do it. You know how like these podcasts, they like to go on tangents. A whole episode about hot chocolate. Now that's a tangent that I can get behind. I can. It makes me feel all soft and squishy inside, like a marshmallow.
I got three mail in. They put them in the mail, samples of Starbucks hot chocolate, just waiting for an emergency. And you know it's a fancy one because in the directions it says you can only add hot milk to it, not hot milk or hot water. So that's the sign of quality, Matt.
In America, we're boycotting Starbucks probably for several reasons, but the most recent one is a workers' strike.
Yeah, well, luckily I go to Starbucks like once every 3 years, so I am doing an unintentional boycott mostly, except for this free hot chocolate that I did not ask for, which in a sense I'm taking resources from them. I'm sticking it to them when I drink this hot chocolate.
There you go. And I a couple winters ago, I had this idea that I was gonna like go around New York and like try all like the fancy hot chocolates, and I really only did like one of them. But this year, I think I'm gonna try a bunch of fancy hot chocolates.
Wow. There are I watch sometimes videos of places like fancy places in your big New York type city type places where they'll do like hot chocolate where it's basically just someone literally melted like a chocolate bar. Like it feels like at some point this is no longer a drink. Like technically it goes down like a drink, but this is a gallstone and that's waiting to happen. Just drinking like a big cup of melted chocolate.
It's just too rich, honestly, for me. I like it a little bit creamy and foamy and whipped creamy and marshmallowy and like that's the good stuff.
You have to cut it with something.
Yes.
But so I hope all of you are enjoying your delicious hot chocolate as we get into the episode tonight, and that is the race to the top tournament.
A tournament of lies.
If you only see one round of the I guess it is night one, so it counts as a tournament, even though technically if you just watch this show and not the other shows, it doesn't really feel like a tournament. Or by other shows, I mean the one other show this tournament lasts. But anyway, the show took place July 27th, 2007, at the Deer Park Community Center in Deer Park, New York, in front of a reported crowd of 450 fans, which the Observer described as a full house, that makes you think, wow, that must be a pretty small building. And it appears to be, we'll talk about it in a sec. But if you're wondering, well, why did they run such a small building, even for ROH standards? Well, we'll go to the Torch first, who wrote at the time, the July 27th event in Long Island, New York has been moved to the Deer Park Community Center. And if you're wondering why all of a sudden they moved from their classic building, we'll go to the PW Insider, who wrote, ROH will be losing their Long Island venue, Sports Plus, in Lake Grove. Sports Plus, a local sporting/arcade complex, which was a pretty cool place that even had its own roller coaster, says Wisconsin.
I agree. It was a pretty cool place. You've heard it before on the podcast. I liked it.
Yeah. It will be shuttering its doors on June 30th. ROH had been aware for some time that the venue had been struggling and are already making alternative plans to run a planned July 27th date at another building in Long Island. One option that has been discussed is the Deer Park Community Center, which has housed a number of independent events over the last several years. Matt, I know you've espoused the love of Sports Plus. Did I ever ask you the important question of, did you ride the indoor roller coaster that I have just learned about?
No, because like I went to these shows, like with the Long Island shows were pretty far away. I didn't usually maybe one time I went with a friend, another time I went with my dad, another time I went by myself, and I was like, in my early 20s, and everyone else there was a teenager at this. So I was like, yeah, I'm not gonna go creep around this place and like do kid stuff by myself as a grown man. But did I
You just made going on a delightful indoor roller coaster sound so much worse than it had to be.
Well,
creep around this place and do kid stuff.
Well, did I want to play laser tag? Yes. Did I want to go on roller coasters? Yes. Would I have done it if I had a bunch of nerdy friends just like me that were like, yeah, we're just gonna bro out here at this kids or amusement park and do completely innocent, non-creepy things there? Yes, but I instead I was just like, I'm going to go to the wrestling and then I'm going to leave and just admire how cool this place seems from afar. Um, but it didn't stick around long enough for me to have my own children and take them to Sports Plus so I could actually do all of the fun activities. But I think
Yeah.
the thing that you have to understand from all this conversation is I am not creepy, and that's the most important thing. Didn't do anything weird at this place. Nothing. Not a single weird thing other than go to an independent wrestling show.
I have nothing but bad memories of laser tag, so I will never be joining you for laser tag.
Fair. Now,
Um,
as far as Deer Park, what I associate Deer Park with is a brand of bottled water that you could get here, and I don't know if they have it in Canada, but they do have it in
no, we
America.
don't.
And yes, and apparently, looking it up, that is named after the town Deer Park in Maryland, not
Mhm.
not Deer Park, Long Island. So, damn it,
I
that's
was
my
going
bummer.
to guess that Deer Park was associated with two things. I'll never reveal what they are, but I have a hunch two things that Deer Park, New York, are kind of known for. But maybe I'm wrong. Um, so we will get to this is the show. I was thrown off by something I will not talk about before the show. It was a happy thing, but I am off kilter to say the least. But let's talk about the conceit of this show because I think that's kind of interesting. We'll go to PW Insider one more time. They wrote about the show. In an attempt to build several names up the roster, Ring of Honor will be running a 16-man tournament on upcoming events starting July 20th in Edison, New Jersey. That's not where they'll be starting, Mike. Titled Race to the Top, Kevin Steen, El Generico, Mike Quackenbush, Davey Richards, and Chris Hero have been announced for the tourney. When asked if this was going to be similar to the Field of Honor the company ran several years ago that started promising and completely fizzled out, ROH Booker Gabe Sapolsky said this was going to be a completely different idea, which that last line of Mike Johnson framing it that way and giving like, no, it's not going to be like that. That made me laugh a
It would
little
be
bit.
so funny if he was like, "Yes, it's going to be exactly like the Field of Honor."
Expect it to go wrong again. But I think it's interesting to talk for a second about ROH's history of tournaments because ROH had a completely different relationship with tournaments than pretty much almost every other of the big U.S. indies during this era. Because when you think back, almost all the biggest indies, their biggest show or shows of the year were usually an annual tournament. Whether it was Chikara had a Tag World Grand Prix, which evolved into King of Trios. PWG had Battle of Los Angeles. IWA Mid South had King of the Death matches, and then they had the Sweet Science 16, which became the Ted Penny Invitational. Even pre-indie boom, ECWA had the Super 8, and the King of Indies got put on, and I think one of the big reasons why it worked that way for all these indies. Why those were usually their big shows of the year was the tournaments were their excuse these were indies that, often even some of the bigger ones like early years PWG where they would fly in have a lot of high good top end nationally, known on the indie scene talent, but then supplant that with cheap local guys that didn't have to pay transportation for. All these indies, Chikara had a few guys that bring in for some shows, but they were heavy on their trainees. Most of these indies did not just do the ROH all-star approach from the bottom to the top. And so doing a tournament once a year would be their excuse to, we'll do 2 or 3 shows in a weekend. So that kind of splits the cost of of a high price plane ticket for a fly-in because we're getting 2 or 3 DVDs and tickets to sell for them rather than just for the plane ticket rather than one. And because ROH never did that, they were like the big indie that was never built around tournaments. If you look at their history, I was just thinking, not counting title tournaments because every promotion has title tournaments, they have up to this point had a very checkered history with tournaments because I think back to, I guess if you want to count Round Robin Challenge as a tournament, which is just a 3-person one night
No, no, no.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. If you don't count that, then we've got Field of Honor in 2003, which was not a success. And you were probably playing with fire doing a mid card. I mean, mid card doesn't really matter, but that was the mid card G1 style round robin tournament that for a lot of reasons was pretty meh. 2004, you had Survival of the Fittest, which again is like a one-night, two-round tournament, which is probably the most successful gimmick match that Gabe came up with, which unless you count the notion of scrambles, I would say that's pretty still mid, but it's fairly normal and pretty okay. Then 2005, we had the Best of the American Super Juniors tournament, which you can go back and listen to that episode in the archive, and we talk about why that show has a bad reputation with New Japan kind of enforcing their booking on it and all of that. They had the Trios tournament that wasn't anything particularly special. And now we have this, which was a 16-man.
Did you mention the Pure Title tournament?
I said I wasn't going to count the title tournaments just because everything has title tournament. I mean, every promotion has title tournaments. But yeah, if you count those, I mean,
I would say like it's not like so ubiquitous to have a one night single elimination tournament the way ROH did that with the first Pure Title tournament. So that's why I would count it. But I get what you're saying.
Yeah, but I just feel like this tournament was, they only did it once. But granted, Gabe's tenure in Ring of Honor is not too long. It's a little over a year from this point.
Yeah, this one is the most like like Battle of Los Angeles or Ted Petty in that it's like 2 nights, first round one night, second round the next night, and then the finals and stuff like that. So in that sense, it is more modeled after a lot of the other like super indie tournaments that were big in that decade.
Yeah, 16-man. So 4 rounds. First round night 1, all the other rounds on night 2. And if you look at who was in, they didn't have any, again, because of the nature of Ring of Honor, there wasn't, they were booking a lot of the top indie names. So it's basically all roster regulars, even guys that seemed fresher like Quack and Bush and the Jakara guys had started taking a few bookings at this time for ROH before this show.
Yeah.
And
like the other ones, like the TPI and the, and Bola and stuff, like what really made them stand out was, bringing in like real special guests and, sometimes even international stars and stuff, like some of those like Bolas and like definitely the 2004 Ted Petty Invitational that had a more all-star lineup than like ROH usually does. So, that is something that they maybe could have tried here to spice it up a little bit, but we can get more into that as it goes on.
Yeah, that's a great point. And yeah, and if you look at the roster of this, it was basically, the race to the top. I think it was Gabe trying to figure out, we just had a big exodus of beloved, long-standing ROH people in recent months. How do I quickly elevate somebody? Well, I guess we'll see in the coming shows how how effective that is. But if you look at the lineup, it's a really good lineup, but it's basically almost everyone in ROH in the mid card to upper mid card that isn't in that world title top level picture. Everyone that isn't Danielson, Aries, the Briscoes, Nigel, most of them.
Strong and Aries, yeah.
Yeah.
It did seem like before we get into the actual show, my criticism of the concept is it seemed kind of slapped together. Like, they could have had spent several shows with people doing promos about how they're going to win this. They could have had some fanfare at the beginning, like the Ted Petty, had like opening ceremonies with everyone coming out and being introduced and stuff. They really didn't. They really just like threw a bunch of shit out there. It felt slapped together. Didn't feel prestigious in the way it was presented, and I do think that was a little bit of a missed opportunity.
And even, I guess it's kind of, spoilers, but if you're listening to this, I think spoilers isn't going to matter. But, Claudio wins this, and it's not even like you win this and get a title shot because Claudio was already booked before this tournament started for a title shot against Morishima. So it's not even like, yes, it's the race to the top, but the winner doesn't even get something that he wasn't already getting.
Claudio never really got a top tier singles push in Ring of Honor. He eventually I'd say like in 2010, the Kings of Wrestling probably had their peak run in the company, but that was 3 years after this. It also didn't really get parlayed into much after the fact.
Yeah. But I guess we'll get to the show. We open with Kevin Steen and El Generico backstage. Steen says everyone has seen what they can do in the tag team division, especially the Briscoes, and it's only a matter of time before they're tag team champions. And then Steen goes on to say he was pretty disappointed when he first heard that they were in something called the Race to the Top tournament because he can't run real fast. But then someone explained to him that's not an actual race, but a bunch of wrestling matches. So now he has no doubt about their success in the tournament. And then Steen says, bet on me. He prompts Generico in that gruff way to say ole because he knows what the fans want. And I think it's always delightful that Steen was, even before he got to like his biggest weight, he was very open to poking fun at his weight. You know, as much as people online called him down for it, he was owning it. So I like that he was like, you know, I wasn't anticipating having to actually run. So
Yeah,
I think it's funny for a wrestler to say that.
But Steen is a good athlete. I bet he could have beaten some people in a race, possibly even us. But I guess we'll never get to find out.
I mean, I bet we could beat a lot of wrestlers in races just because I bet you 40% of them have shot knees.
Yes.
So.
Well, wrestlers that are our age, perhaps. Probably not wrestlers in their 20s.
That is one of my favorite things in wrestling occasionally when someone chases someone around the ring. And that happens on the show, but I don't think what I'm about to say happens on this show, where the wrestler chasing the other wrestler is clearly faster than the wrestler running away, but they're not supposed to catch them. So they both have to start on the fly. Like, okay, I have to start slowing down. Like I have to make this still look realistic, but I have to find the pace in the middle. And that's always a rare delight when that happens. But delights even rarer that we didn't get to see were the dark matches on this show. We got two. They were not on the DVD. That's what makes them dark matches. The first one would be the ROH student match. Alex Payne and Shane Hagedorn defeated Ernie Osiris and Mitch Franklin. And then in another dark tag match, Portia Perez and Sarah Del Rey defeated Ariel and Daisy Hayes. And actually, you could have seen this because this was, as we mentioned on the review of the show, this was a DVD extra on the Live from Tokyo show DVD. So if you bought the DVD version of that show, you could see this match. And that brings us to the opener that on the main DVD that we all get to see. The Race to the Top tournament, a first round match. Pele Primo defeated BJ Whitmer via pinfall in 3 minutes, 37 seconds with a small package. Pele comes out with a new trophy, and I know this because he kept excitedly saying, new trophy, over and over again to fans as he made his entrance. Matt, what'd you think about this match?
Well, less of a match and more of an angle to get over the fact that, you know, let's be honest, the most important thing, BJ Whitmer has an evil goatee now. And that, I feel like, is like the most on-the-nose expression of a heel turn that I've seen in a while, right? Like, literally evil goatee. But because he didn't have one before the show, right?
Yeah, like, you know, either you're going to turn, either if you grow the goatee, either you're an evil duplicate of you know, ultra reality version of yourself, or you're a sports GM that's 2 months away from getting fired.
Well, Whitmer is not a sports GM that's too much away from getting fired, but he is an evil version of himself, and you know you could tell because he's pushing Rhett Titus around, who's just doing security on the floor. He's Whitmer, you know, Pelly's doing his Pelly stuff. He's outrunning Whitmer, and he's doing some head scissors and such, but really Whitmer is just being aggressive. He's chucking Pelly onto the top rope. He's slapping him around. He continues to mess with Rhett on the outside, which allows Pelly to be distracted and get a quick like knock off the top rope and a small package. And then we get to just see Whitmer do more bad stuff because Pelly does his crowd surfing, and I guess the whole year of crowd surfing built up to this moment where Whitmer pulls him out of the crowd, buckle bombs him, hits a big boot, attacks Rhett Titus. We get a BJ Blew It chant. I'd say the crowd, for what it's worth, reacted well to this angle. So I thought this worked out pretty well. You know, we got Whitmer's character over. It allows Pele to have another match the next night. Didn't light my world on fire or anything, but it was effective for what it was. Maybe I'm trying to decide if I think this is a good way to open the show. Maybe they could have done this a little bit later and I had a match at the beginning, but I feel like it's fine. I feel like this was fine.
I felt like in some ways on paper, the booking of this is great. And in some ways I didn't like it. Like on the first on first off, BJ's losing streak, continuing, and Pele is the perfect guy for this spot in the sense that a win. He's at the push level, Pele, at this point, where a win over BJ here becomes the biggest win of his career, but simultaneously it's the worst loss of BJ's ROH career. So I think that's an interesting little wrinkle you can do with Pele. And but I was more mixed on how it happened. Whitmer almost immediately when this match starts, he takes a tumble to the floor where he bumps into Rhett Titus, ROH student, who is on the floor. And he doesn't really bump into him, actually. He just lands really close to him at ringside. And then he gets mad that Rhett is close to him. And that leads to a distraction. And then at the very end of the match, that's when things come full circle because Whitmer goes to climb to the top turnbuckle. He sees that Rhett is at ringside in the same corner of the ringside area. He starts yelling at him. Pele crotches BJ on the top turnbuckle. Small package wins. And my issues with this are, one, it's another example of, we see a few of these on this night, which are these gay booking tropes. And to be fair, this is one that a lot of bookers have, which is something randomly happens that never usually happens in your promotion just to serve the booking for one night. Because commentary, I felt like they did do a good job explaining that, well, Rhett's an ROH student. He's also working security tonight, but as ROH students tended to do. But that doesn't explain why Rhett was in a spot I had never seen a student at during a match, like just standing dead center at ringside, like not even against the barricade right at the start of the match. I don't know why he, except for it served to do this weird spot, except he wasn't so close that BJ actually touches him when he gets thrown out through the ropes. And also, I think at this point, when students worked security, they wore shirts that actually said security on them. And on this night, Rhett's in the jeans and like a black dress shirt or something, which made him seem even less official and more just randomly like, why is he here? What is he doing?
I will say for that point, I seem to remember like guys just wearing that sort of different kind of stuff every time. Like I don't know if like they had a uniform per se.
Yeah, maybe they go in and out of that because I remember there was a time when it wasn't like that, and then there was a time where they were wearing the official shirt. So maybe they're going back. I just kind of got a little thrown by that. But then my other issue is I would have liked to see Pele get an even cleaner win because I know doing it this way protects BJ a little and it helps sell the ongoing story that he keeps taking his eye off the ball and then losing matches. But to me, a completely clean loss to Pele doesn't hurt Whitmer at all at this point by the nature of what this losing streak is. And it gives Pele a bit more, but yeah, that's most of my thoughts on this because, like you were saying, this is mostly an angle. So as far as a match, there's not much to say. Pele gets spots at the beginning, at the end, due to BJ getting distracted, but otherwise Whitmer controls the match. Pele sells well, like he usually does. And I did feel like Whitmer did a decent job of acting like he was taking Pele lightly, but not in an overt heel way at the start of the match, where he's still, kind of in the middle at this point. So, like you said, it was okay. But after the match, Pele immediately goes crowd surfing, and this is where I really noticed how anyone watching this will note that the building is tiny. It looks like it only has room for 3 or 4 rows, and the entranceway is barely further than 3 or 4 rows from the ring. So this was definitely a small building, at least the way they configured it. But Whitmer then grabs Pele mid-crowd surf. He pulls him back ringside. He throws him into a ring post. He tosses him to the ring where Rhett Titus is already selling. Presumably, he got attacked by BJ off camera, and we just didn't see it. Whitmer hits Pele with a buckle bomb, a big boot, and he gets a mix of boos and applause before he hits a brainbuster. And then at that point, the crowd chants, "BJ blew it," as he left the ring, which actually, I got to give them credit. That's a pretty good chant, actually. Yeah, I thought this angle was good, but again, to pick a nit here, part of me would have liked this even more if we had not already seen Whitmer snap on refs multiple times before and get proceedingly more frustrated. I would have liked it more if this was just the first time we saw him snap, and where him attacking Pele is this one singular moment where everything changes for his character, rather than the latest instance of him getting pissed. But I guess you could also say this is more of a progression, which I could see some people liking better.
Yeah, that's how I thought of it.
Yeah, so yeah, again, dealer's choice. We then join Claudio Castagnoli backstage. Claudio says ever since he started in Ring of Honor, people have said he has it all: the strength, the power, the ability, and the agility to take it to the top of Ring of Honor. Claudio then awkwardly says, I don't know even how to say this. He goes, "And today," and then he has this awkward pause. So he's like, "And today, And tomorrow at the Race to the Top tournament, I will prove that I can and will take it to the top. He then says he'll be coming for Larry Sweeney. And Claudio has never been a good promo. And even at this point, in a very short, to the point, just say these two bullet points promo like this one, there was still a real awkwardness that came through. But on the other hand, I always feel bad when I critique him, because I will say he does a hell of a lot better cutting a promo in a second language than I would do, because I don't have a second language. And Matt, do you have any thoughts, or are we just going to go to the second match?
Claudio is he's improving slowly, is what I would say at the promos.
Yeah, I think we're late enough in Claudio's career to say he'll never be a great promo, but I will say at this stage of his life, the modern stage, 2025, he has gotten to the point where he is a perfectly serviceable promo, I would say. He has worked on it and gotten better.
Claudio can, on certain occasions, cut a very effective promo.
Yeah.
It's not someone you would rely. It would not be someone you would rely on to do it, but it has happened, and it can happen.
And that brings us to our next match, another Race to the Top tournament first round match. Davey Richards defeated Jigsaw via submission in 7 minutes, 29 seconds when he made him tap out to the Kimura lock. As you may already be noticing, 8 tournament matches plus 2 non-tournament matches is leading Gabe to book some bouts a little shorter than normal. Davey Richards, I don't know if you noticed this, Matt, but Davey Richards, a month after the Chris Benoit murders, decides to wear a leather vest that made me think nothing but of Chris Benoit. He then, during the match, does literal cross faces, not the submission, but those arm strikes to the face. He does that to Jigsaw. He throws headbutts. He does the throat slit gesture before doing his finisher, and he pulls out a German suplex. Now,
this really came into play a month later in the Manhattan Mayhem 2 when he wrestled Pac. At the time, Pac, but I think at the time they did say Pac. And I think that match is heavily edited on the DVD. We'll see when we watch it. But boy, did the crowd react to that. Like, there was a lot of Benoit-related chants and such. So it was definitely certainly noticed at the time, for sure.
Yeah, it was there was something Benoit related that gets much more of a reaction later. I didn't really feel much of a reaction here from the crowd, but it was one of those things where here it was at the point where I was like, well, maybe he didn't mean it, except I know, which we won't spoil, but I know what you're alluding to. And at that point, looking at this match retroactively, you kind of feel like, oh, this is fitting a pattern. Like he was trying to somehow reclaim or bring Benoit back or do a tribute to him almost immediately, and which is very bizarre.
Or use it for heat, which I don't know which.
Yeah, either way, it was weird. But for the match, this was short and slight enough that it never really developed into something too notable, but I thought it was perfectly watchable for the time they had. There are a couple times here where Jigsaw's able to counter a big Davey move, and I was reminded at those points of when Jimmy Raven in a shoot talked about how when he feuded with Davey right after Davey started in ROH, Davey wanted to do so many counters, and Jimmy was like, whoa, like that makes no sense in our first match to do this many counters of our signature spots, particularly when it's Davey's debut. But then I watched this match and see it here, and I realized Davey must just love calling in like as many matches as he can. Let's just counter a lot of stuff, even if we've never wrestled. Like I like counters, and I did like a couple of Davey's offensive fakeouts here, like when he goes for that signature kick to the chest that he always does. Here, Jigsaw covers up, so he just like shrugs and kicks Jigsaw on the back instead. I thought that was cute. Or when he has Jigsaw up against the barricade with his arms over in that classic position where you know a guy's going to throw chops, and then he just hits him with headbutts instead. I thought, okay, that's a neat little fakeout, slash maybe tribute to a murderer. So Jigsaw does get to do a bit here. For the short time, he takes a gnarly bump where he hurls himself over the top rope to do a flying crossbody to the floor, and Davey bails, so Jigsaw crashes and burns face first. And I think he also did a pretty great job of selling Davey's arm work late in the match, because at one point after Davey's worked on his arm, Jigsaw gets on offense, and he does this whole sequence where his worked over arm is just hanging limply at his crotch like it's a dead limb. Like he's not shaking out going, ow. It's as if it's almost paralyzed. So overall, because this was short and slight, I'll give it like a really strong average rating. It just wasn't long enough to really get going, but I think with a few more minutes, these two probably could have had something that was I would have rated higher than this.
Yeah, for me, I mean, I think I probably liked it a little bit less than you, just because it was the beginning of a trend, which is just this is a good matchup that they didn't put their best effort into, and like I don't know, I feel like one of the things that made these tournaments exciting was you had these great matchups where you just could possibly get a lot of great matches, and after a couple of matches like this, it was pretty clear, oh, we're not going to get a lot of great matches. Like these are all worked as undercard, undercard, undercard matches, and you know, because there are a lot of talented guys matching well, they are still fine. They're still enjoyable to an extent, but even in 7 minutes, I feel like they could have had a much better match. Um, there was nothing wrong with it, except that they didn't do as much as they could. Like you said, there were cool things that Richards did. And Jigsaw, like after just a short amount of time, does a really good job selling his arm. Like more than people who get their arms worked over for like 20 plus minutes. Richard had like a minute of like kicking his arm and doing an arm hold, and Jigsaw was just had his arm dangling at his side. Um, and while Richards is doing Benoit tributes, he also does an Owen Hart tribute by blocking a Jigsaw victory roll, the way that Owen Hart beat Bret Hart at WrestleMania 10. So you get that in there too. But yeah, overall, I thought it was fairly anticlimactic and kind of portended to what the rest of the show would be like, or as far as how much effort was put into these first round matches. Not bad, perfectly fine, but I wish they maybe made this tournament a little bit more special by really putting out and trying to have great matches throughout the first round, but 'twas not to be.
Yeah, I think you made a great point earlier, but one thing I want to mention too, first, I just felt like I just realized maybe one reason why Jigsaw's selling is so good is because I remember spotlighting and really pointing out on some match he had earlier in the year that I felt like his body language when he was selling was really good. And maybe it's the same here where when you wear a mask, some guys go, I have to really tell the story with my arm. Like, because, if you're selling your arm, most wrestlers can make a pained expression, and he has to do it all with his arm. So maybe that really has pushed a guy like him. But it's something I've really appreciated a couple times now with him. But to the point you made, I thought was a great point, which was one thing, even though we're only 2 matches in, to get into what you were saying about why the show is so disappointing, I think you made a really good point there. I think one reason extra why it was disappointing for me was one thing about tournaments, and as a kid, I loved wrestling tournaments, but as I got older, I kind of realized tournaments aren't that great because oftentimes you get a lot of shorter matches or matches where wrestlers are giving 50 or 75% effort because they know they're going to, and all that's because they know they're going to have to wrestle maybe one more or two more times in the night. And I thought the advantage this show would have would be, yes, these are tournament matches, but they're all the only match everyone has this night. No one's working more than once on this night. And it still had that feel of some of the matches felt like cut on time, even though this DVD is not close to 3 hours. And it felt like wrestlers were giving less than 100%. So yeah, I had that same vibe where I was like, this should be the one tournament where everyone on this night should be just going all out. But I guess it has that B-show-itis.
Yeah, now let me ask something, because I'm guessing that you sprung for a lot of those super indie DVDs that had the tournaments during this era, the Ted Petty's and the Bolas, and I don't know. I don't think I ever ordered a Super 8. I don't think those ever got the same like in-ring buzz that the other ones did. But I'd say Bola and Ted Petty Invitational are the two that people really talked a lot about every year, right? Like that would be the big two. In that era, I don't remember those tournaments having like wall-to-wall amazing matches like a Super J Cup or something did. I feel like the later Bolas, like in the 2010s, you'd get more of those like, great match after great match after great match. But I remember getting the 2006 Bola on DVD, and I don't remember that being just like a bonanza of 4-star matches. I remember there was a really memorable match between Super Dragon and Necro Butcher. But like, you know what I mean? Like, I don't think even Ted Petty Invitational 2004, I think, is what people hold up as like the gold standard of that era of tournaments. I mentioned it before. And even that, like, there are some great matches on there. I remember I think it was a Roderick Strong against Samoa Joe match. There were a few others really good ones. But and I think there was a Quackenbush and Danielson match in that too. Um, um, and there are others, but like I don't think people like look back at 2004 TPI and are like, oh yeah, here's this match of the year, here's this match of the year, here's this match of the year. So I don't know if these tournaments in this era ever totally lived up to what the potential seemed like they could be. What's your
And again,
recollection?
I was going to, that was the exact example that I was going to use. I was going to say, to your point, because you referenced the Ted Petty 2004 earlier, which is a who's who of indie wrestling for the era.
And a legitimately great couple of shows. Like not don't
Yeah,
get me
yeah,
wrong. Yeah.
but I would say there's not like one classic match there that's really stands out. There's a lot of good to very good, really enjoyable matches, and I feel like you're enjoying it more for the depth of the cards and the novelty of, wow, there are so many incredible wrestlers that went on to do bigger things in front of a relatively small crowd working, and it's not that, but that's kind of my point, was like, on paper that line would go, man, I'm going to see at least a couple match of the year contenders, and I don't think you get that. And yeah, I think that is the nature of so many tournaments, and I would agree with what you said, which is Bola, I think, kind of broke against that a bit. And some of these tournaments, King of the Indies and stuff, there were shows that had really great matches, but I feel I just see a lot of times when you watch tournaments, you see great matches where I go away going, that was really good, but I bet you if those guys if that was the only match they had to work that night, they would have done an even better version of that, which is kind of
Yeah.
like the curse of tournaments. Even though tournaments on the surface feels like you're getting more, you're like, oh man, all these possibilities, all these guys. And
Well, I do think that people like think back to some of these really incredible single elimination tournaments they had in Japan, especially in the 90s, and like think what could be. The 2004 and 2005 Super J Cups in particular. And I do think that's kind of what these tournaments aspire to be. And I don't know if they ever got there. I mean, probably in some, depending on what your taste is, because I'm sure a lot of people don't think that anything American Indies ever did live up to, some of the great like Liger or Benoit or great Sasuke matches from the 90s, but probably not until those mid to late 2010s Bolas did we really get anything that comes close as far as like that level of great match throughout a tournament.
well, in that sense, that's where the G1 and round robin tournaments kind of work better, because you get one match a night, so you can put more of yourself into it. But even those long G1s, there are still matches you'll see in those tournaments where you can tell, oh, they're pacing themselves. They're taking a little bit of a step back here because they've got bigger matches coming up, and they just probably worked a couple ones 2 nights earlier that were colossal, but yeah, tournaments, they're like me. They look good on. Well, actually, that's the opposite. I was gonna say they look good on paper. It doesn't look good on paper either. But I would say, they're usually good, but they're not as good as you hope.
Yeah, exactly.
So I also want to mention, at one point during this match, Davey threw sweat at a ringside camera, which would be a great shot, except it's the backup ringside cam that ROH just filmed the whole show with, but they only used it in case of emergencies. They almost never used it, unless I think on the first pay-per-view we noticed they used it. I want a compilation of all the mini promos and moments wrestlers have done into the camera ROH never used, because I think that would be at least 10 minutes long at this point in ROH. Like, we have seen enough wrestlers cut promos into a camera that's never been used, and do things to play into a camera that's never been used, and it's all been deleted probably. But yeah, after the match, Davey spits on the ref. Jigsaw gets his name chanted. I guess I just mentioned that to say this was a crowd where they were pretty into everybody, including the Jakara guys. They were pretty happy to see everybody on the show. For a smaller crowd, this felt like a crowd that knew the company and were just happy to watch the show. So we jump backstage to join the resilience of Austin Aries, Eric Stevens, and Matt Cross. Aries is holding 2 basketballs and says people have said a lot of things about him, but they have never questioned the size of his balls. Duh, duh, duh. Aries says after sitting at home for the last 2 months watching Stevens and Cross being outnumbered and getting their butts kicked, he doesn't question the size of their balls either. He guarantees that all will make them stronger, and he tells Cross to use his speed, and he tells Stevens to use his strength, and race to the top. Aries then says the Brazilians doesn't quit, and tonight he's gunning for Roderick Strong and his FIP heavyweight title, saying he knows Roddy sleeps with it like a girlfriend because he doesn't have an actual girlfriend. Aries says he's had 3 months to think of everything he's going to do to Roddy, and it starts tonight. Aries says they're going to show that ROH is all what it's all about. They're not Bush. ROH isn't Bush League. And then as he walks up, I think he mutters something like, "We bring cages to our pay-per-views," which was that a shot at TNA? I tried to figure out what the hell this was. I don't know exactly what he said, but it seemed like a shot probably at TNA, seeing as how he just fought to get a release from there.
Yeah, who knows? All I know is this was another in a long string of not very good nights for the Brazilians. Spoiler alert. So this pep talk was not effective.
This Aries promo, I find is usually a good promo. I did not think this was good, and we'll talk more about it maybe a little later. And this brings us to the Race to the Top tournament first round match. I mean, especially because, again, it's everything about Aries that isn't good, which is immature, kind of petty, almost kind of big timing his partners in a weird way, just like all the worst parts of him in one promo. So, Race to the Top tournament first round match. Claudio Castagnoli defeated Hello Wicked via pinfall in 7 minutes 2 seconds with the Ricola bomb. Another shorty, Matt. What did you think about this one?
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of the same thing. Like, Claudio's fun to watch. They do kind of similar to what Jigsaw did with Davey. They're fun little rope running and arm drag pseudo lucha sequence. Claudio always worked well with the Chikara guys for obvious reasons, because he basically was one in a lot of ways. But the match never really got into any kind of special gear. I'd say it stayed in like I don't know, maybe first gear, maybe like 1.5 gear. I don't even know if it ever totally got to second gear. Everything was smooth except for some of the Hollow Wicked's roll-ups near the end. Everything that Claudio did was smooth. Let me put it that way. It was fun and all. The outcome was obviously never in doubt, and it was pretty slight and unmemorable. So like I said, basically like first gear, maybe a little bit more than that, but for these two, first gear is still decently fun. So I would say this match was decently enjoyable, but again, could have been better.
I think this is another match where I think having Hollow Wicked take on fellow Chikara guy Claudio, that's a good way to try and showcase Hollow Wicked, as he at this point was trying to break it into ROH, which he doesn't get that full-time job, but give him an opponent who is familiar with him and his style. But to repeat a point I've made a million times on the show, I don't think putting new prospects in these short matches where they get just a little bit of offense or random 4 or 6 ways tells you as the booker near as much about what a prospect is capable of, or if they can even get over in front of your audience, as booking that same wrestler for say 13 minutes and just telling them go nuts.
Yeah, I mean, I think that Gabe should have used as a model for trying to get new guys over I know this is a weird example, but if you think back to how well it worked, the Chad Collier and Matt Stryker matches from early 2003, those matches really got over very well, and they had like pretty lengthy matches where they were competitive and like the new people had to win because they were both new. That model is not used often enough in this era.
Yeah, that's a great example. The example I always go back to, maybe because it's recent too, which is the Kevin Steen El Generico, which is the first run. They got decent opportunities, but not really. And Steen has talked about how they were kind of worried in that first run, whether they were told this or not, to like hold back and don't overshadow the main events. And he talked, we've documented how that first run for both those guys was very underwhelming and it didn't turn out well for them. And then when they came back this year, Gabe gave them a 1-match tryout before he even was going to commit to them. Put them against the Briscoes, one of the top, most talented acts in the company, gave them a good amount of time and said his only instructions to them was something to the effect of like, tear the house down or whatever. And in that one match, he learned way more about him, to the point where as soon as they walked back to the curtain, he says, "I'm booking you guys full time." That's the point. He learned more in giving them one really fair match where he's like, "I'm going to put you in with great opponents, a lot of time, no restrictions," than he did with, months of these half-measured, I'm going to put you in for 8 minutes against this guy and don't go too nuts and you're third from the bottom, whatever. I feel like you just have to kind of have a little bit more guts in your booking, because I think one thing about Gabe's booking with ROH is, with an occasional exception, because there were some exceptions where he pushed a guy right off the bat, like there's certain guys I think Samoa Joe he did pretty well with, but obviously he did well with Samoa Joe. But usually, though, with any new talent that Gabe is unsure of, they get booked like this, where he, by putting them in an short early match or hide them in a 4 or 6-way spot fest, it minimizes what kind of impression they can make, but also minimizes any damage they can do to the show if they turn out to blow their opportunity or be underwhelming. But to me, that's an argument not for booking guys in short matches. It's a booking for for scouting guys well, so that when you book a guy, you know they're worthy of a really good opportunity, rather than I'm gonna dip my toe in the water. Because I feel you get much more just telling a wrestler, I'm going to put you in one big match, sink or swim, rather than the way Gabe normally books, which is like, I'm going to dunk you in the water for 2 seconds and pull you out, and you're okay, we're okay, you're okay, but then you never know if someone can sink or swim if you do that over and over again. So anyway, for this match, I feel like this match had both flashes of something cool that could stand out, and periods where it just felt like a very, very boilerplate version of established ROH guy hits his signature moves on enhancement talent on the way to relatively easy win. Because there are 2 or 3 extended sequences here where Claudio and Hal Wicked are running around. They're doing big arm drag variations and being athletic. And those are the flashes of coolness. Because it's not that no one else on the card could do those spots. They could. But these are maybe the 2 lankiest guys on the show. These are dudes with very long legs in particular. And there is some fun novelty for me in 2 guys with their body types doing that Chikara-style Lucharisu sequences together. I wish we got more than those short bursts in the match, because those moments were, to me, cool and memorable. But the rest of this match, I felt like was just competent and forgettable. So overall, I'd rate this again as average. Just do the short length, then yeah, you get little pops of something. Race to the Top tournament first round match. Mike Quackenbush defeated Matt Sydal via pinfall in 14 minutes, 12 seconds after he hit the Black Tornado Slam, which Dave Prazak reasonably called the BTS to shorten it, which I think a lot of announcers did at the time, but that made me chuckle because that acronym, the first thing I think of now, is not a wrestling move, but the intensely popular Korean boy band. So I just thought Mike Quackenbush with the BTS is a fun mental thing to think about. And before the match, Larry Sweeney gets on the mic in the ring to tell us that this is a special day because the hottest commodity in wrestling, Matt Sydal, is gracing us with his presence. Larry says Matt's entertaining offers from Ring of Honor, from Dragon Gate, from TNA, which of course gets boos, and the WWE, which actually got slightly louder boos than TNA, which kind of surprised me because often TNA was enemy number 1 at this time. Larry says his job is to get Matt the best money possible. He has some important people from those companies in the back to talk to, so he's got to take care of business in the back. Larry says Tank Tolan, he has some important training to do, so he has to go to the back. Sarah Del Rey needs to luxuriate herself with their private masseuse in the back. And at this point, the crowd starts chanting, "Shut the fuck up." Larry says, most importantly, Bobby Dempsey has to go backstage to guard the Sweet and Sour Incorporated buffet and make sure no one steals free food. Larry tells Matt that he knows this Quackenbush guy, and Matt has an easy night ahead of him, so he doesn't need any of them. So the entire Sweet and Sour entourage goes to the back as we get a loud quack chant.
So Sweeney sounded kind of subdued here. Like, whenever the crowd interrupted him, he was just like, listen to me. Like, just like, he didn't yell or anything. Like, I was wondering if he was sick, but then he was a little more animated during the Hero match. So I guess he was just saving all of his energy for that.
Yeah, he was just trying to get through, I guess. Maybe they were worried the show was – it feels like the show – they felt like it was worried that it was going to be long with the way they were booking a lot of these early matches.
But it wasn't.
Yeah, exactly. I'm just going to look up how long was this. I guess it
was like 2 hours and like 38, 39, 40 minutes, something like that.
2 hours, 41 minutes.
Yeah.
Yeah. So really, again, when I'm looking at these early matches on the card, I'm like, oh, these are 6-7 minutes. They could have gotten a few more minutes each.
7 minutes, Trevor?
Yeah, that would have brought them up
six,
oh my God. Oh my God. Oh my
All right, sorry. I'm sorry.
I can't. Oh, that's not even the first time this week I've gotten hit with that. But but yeah. So as far as the match, we get let me just see.
I threw you off with my 6-7.
I lost my place in the notes, but Oh my God, did I forget my notes for this? No, I can talk about it without my notes. This was a match I was pretty disappointed in. To me, this match was like, when you take a sip of a glass of soda that you like, but it's been left out a while. You like the flavor, you like the ingredients. It's kind of what you expected, but it's just there's something missing. It's just flat. It's missing some fizz. I felt that was this match for me, where I was really looking forward to this match on paper. I didn't have any memories of it. Two guys I really like. I thought they could mesh well together. And the match was kind of in the style a little bit that I thought it would be. It wasn't bad. I would say it was like a low good or maybe a real high above average only, but it wasn't a bad match, but it was flat. There was maybe a bit more submission work than you'd expect from these two, but I didn't have a problem with that at all. I enjoyed the mat stuff, but I think that's what I say after every episode of this podcast. By the way, I enjoy the mat stuff. But anyway,
I enjoyed the mat stuff and the mic stuff, but just not as much as I thought I liked the mat and the mic stuff.
I think there's an all right level of action, but the match just never, like you were talking about earlier, a match never getting out of first or maybe 1.5 gear. I felt like this match never hit that last gear for me. And I also continue to get that feeling, with the exception of maybe his performance in the 6-man tag that we just saw on the last show in Osaka, that Matt Sydal is holding back maybe just a little. But again, if I'm right about that, that's no shade, because I always say if he certainly wouldn't be the first wrestler who tried to preserve themselves a little more when they knew they were on the cusp of signing a contract with a big promotion. One thing I've got to say, though, is Quack has been really over pretty much everywhere on this little ROH run so far, which is either a testament to his popularity, Chikara's popularity, or both. The fans were really pumped to see him, and in matches like this, they're fully behind him the whole way. They pop big when he gets the win here, maybe to the point of maybe they didn't even think they were expecting Quack to win. It might be a bit of a mild upset to them. And one thing I think I appreciate about Quack is he's good at emoting during the performance of moves, not just between them. I think sometimes he can overact and get a little hammy, but I really like to say how he sold a drop kick in the corner with not just his facial expression, but also he covers his chest up and kind of just curls up into himself in pain. Or when he's trying to fight to land a suplex, he lets out a scream just to let you know he's really having to put a lot of effort into to get Sydal over. And another thing about Quack is, and this is no offense to any school teachers out there, there's been some criticism of him that, Mike Quackenbush, he doesn't have that physical imposing look to him. He looks like a school teacher, but I feel like that occasionally works in his favor when he takes a big bump, because when you see some muscular, big badass wrestler take a big bump, you think that must suck. But that's their world. They can handle. They're not like us. They're huge people. But when you see Mike Quackenbush take the same bump, sometimes it really feels like you're saying your school teacher take a big bump and you're thinking, holy shit, he cannot handle this. He is dead. Call an athletic commission. This needs to be looked into. So there was like one spot or two in this match where I kind of was reminded of that. But yeah, the other thing I noticed from this match, I know I'm going on long, I'll just say, I also continue to mourn that I don't feel like Matt Sydal ever got to use his full potential as a heel anywhere. He does such a great job of being a very specific kind of heel, which is corny in this insanely smug, self-satisfied way that makes you want to punch him. At one point in this match, the crowd is chanting for Mike Quackenbush, and Sydal just shouts, "Shut the quack up!" And it's so dumb, and you can tell he is so happy with himself that if someone did that earnestly, it would be annoying, but him doing it is the right kind of annoying, because he is so fucking smug about it. And also at one point in this match, Matt does the weirdest cocky cover ever, where he kneels down and he puts one open hand on one of Quack's shoulders in a way where it honestly looks like he's playing Twister instead of making a cover. It is just bizarre, but I guess I'll just say, I think the fact these small details were the most interesting parts of this match to me, and what I'm focusing on over the big X and O's of this match, kind of just, that's evidence number one of this match just didn't click.
I agree with pretty much everything you said. I maybe liked it a tad more than you. It was definitely the most substantial match so far. Like, it was the longest. It's either the first or second longest match of the tournament, and or the first round of the tournament, I should say. And yeah, you made a good point about Sydal. which we've made before, he never really gets fully into being a heel. He gets to his heelishness is all predicated on him just being annoying. Like he's never completely dastardly. You compare him to Hero, who also does a lot of stuff that just makes him annoying, but he also cheats. And
Mhm.
Seidel doesn't really cheat. He just kind of like he makes his setups for his moves overly elaborate in an annoying way. He looks at the crowd annoyingly. He says annoying things to the crowd, but he never does anything too heinous. You know what I mean? Um,
Yeah.
I think the reason I like the match more than you is I still think that Quack in his early part of the match where he's doing the mat work and all the wacky roll ups and maneuvering into holds and stuff, it still does feel like a breath of fresh air in this era of ROH. He was definitely somebody that helped things feel a little bit fresher, and I like that. But yeah, I mean, they don't get into a particularly high gear. I think the pace is a little bit slower than it could be, especially when Seidel is on offense. I think him just taking his time between each move, I think that's kind of his way of being a heel, I guess.
Yeah.
And yeah, but they do some fun stuff near the end. They the different reversals. I like the finish being that Quack avoided the shooting star press, and Seidel landed on his feet, and then Quack just did another one of his convoluted holds into a roll up in to win the match. That sort of stuff I really enjoyed. So I think this is probably my favorite match up to this point in the round. Like not my favorite match of the night or anything, but I thought it was okay. Like slightly better than the other matches we've seen so far.
If this makes sense, I think it was simultaneously my favorite match of the show so far and my most disappointing because I had the highest expectations and it got more time than everything else.
Yes,
like
definitely.
you were saying. So it was like, yeah, you gave me more, but I wanted even more than I wanted from, say, Jigsaw versus Davey Richards. But after the match, the crowd chants Quack, and Mike makes a point basically immediately after he wins to ask Bobby Cruz for a bottle of water. I think earlier in the night, Lenny Laird on commentary said the building was hot, and that must have been like knowing from the reports from people there because it is not often you see a wrestler go out of the way to like get me a goddamn drink now before I even shake hands or get out of the ring. So yeah, he must have been a pretty thirsty boy in a hot building, and he does then after he gets his drink shake Seidel's hand. So this goes to your point too about him Seidel not being dastardly. Even though he's aligned with Sweeney now, and even though he's acting kind of douchey, he doesn't cheat. And when he loses, he shakes the babyface's hand. So it's like this weird. He's the tamest heel we've seen. Just kind of annoying. In that sense, a lot of us are heels. But we go to our next match, another race to the top tournament first round match. Chris Hero, escorted to the ring by Bobby Dempsey, Larry Sweeney, Sarah Del Rey, and Tank Tolan, defeated Eric Stevens via pinfall in 14 minutes, 55 seconds after he hit the Hero's welcome. Hero comes out with his entire entourage. So I guess the Sweeney deal making, the Tank training, the Del Rey massage receiving, the Dempsey buffet guarding, they all must have ended quickly because before the match, Hero warms up with Tank's resistance bands, and Sweeney says he'd pay to watch Hero work out, which for some reason made me laugh. And then when the ref complains about Hero doing this, Hero says, quote, "I'm an athlete. I get to warm up and 2 timeouts." I like that. He thinks he gets 2 timeouts during every match. And Hero then decides he wants Eric Stevens' ring corner, the one he's standing in. So he browbeats Stevens into just giving it up, which I felt made Stevens look kind of like he should have stood his ground as the big tough babyface. Instead, you just see him like moments later, he is standing in the other corner. He's like, okay, I guess. Hero then poses for the crowd some more. He works out some more. We get some chants. Eric then mocks Hero's knee lunges, and Hero goes outside and kicks the barricade in frustration. And I'm saying all this to tell you I timed this from the start of Hero's entrance to the moment the bell rings was almost 5 minutes on top of the almost 15 minutes this match got. So that is some Southern wrestling level stalling, and definitely by far the most time any match in this first round gets. Matt, what did you think they did with it?
Yeah, I mean, I could see somebody loving that, and this match to me contained multitudes because, I'm someone who's a little bit over the top amount of stalling, and silly healing stuff that Hero is doing in this era. We've talked about it before. It's just a lot for me. I think a little of it would have gone a long way. I get that the abundance of it is kind of the point. So I'm not ignorant of that, but still, it doesn't totally work for me the way maybe it did at the time or that it does for some other people. But, there's still funny moments. There was a spot early where the crowd chants for Hero and he goes, "Don't patronize me, you bunch of jerk-offs." And then during one of the spots where Hero is like, I don't know, doing his wacky whatever and like doing flips out of the ring and stuff, Sweeney looks into the camera and goes, "I'd pay money to see this guy work out, wouldn't you?" I thought that was a great line. There's a spot where Hero gets Stevens in a leg lock like early in the match, and he just says to about himself, he just goes, "Oh, excellent wrestling," like, which I also enjoyed. So it's not like I don't enjoy any of this stuff. It's just the amount of it got to be a lot. But then I thought the match got really good. Like the crowd was kind of like in a silly mood early, but then they got them into like literally dueling chants between the two, which is the first one of those you heard all night, maybe one of the only ones you heard all night. They have Eric gets to do some of his hard hitting. They have a few slugfests in the middle of the ring. There's a spot where like Hero tries to like fire up and Stevens knocks him down. There's another spot where Stevens fires up and almost starts no-selling stuff. It becomes like a pretty good, like serious match as things get going. And I thought Eric looked pretty good here. And Hero when he wants to be is one of the best wrestlers there is. So the middle of this match I thought was great. And then they went back to some of the heelish stuff near the end, where Sweeney pulls Sinclair out of the ring during a count, which I'm never a fan of. And then Stevens chases Sweet and Sour Inc. around the ring, and everyone is running. Like this is kind of like what you were talking about, right? Where everyone has to run kind of slow to not be caught. And then Dempsey's alone in the ring with Stevens, which allows Hero to sneak up from behind with the Hero's Welcome. I don't know. In ROH, especially like in a tournament like this, like I just don't like these kind of cheap hill endings. I get that it's something different. But the whole pulling the ref out of the ring, I'm never going to love that spot. I just feel like it's like the most obvious thing that should be a disqualification that there possibly is, and it's obviously it's been a trope in wrestling since, I don't even know when, the late 90s, I guess. But it's, I'm never going to get used to it. So while I thought this was actually a pretty hot match at different points and maybe in some ways the best match up to now at the tournament, there were elements of it that took it down for me. The performance of the wrestlers was good, though.
I would agree with you on some points in a big way. I think I like this match significantly less than you. This match really frustrated me in a lot of ways, and it's the match, strangely enough, that I ended up having, like when I looked over at my notes, the most notes for, the most thoughts of. This match was another I saw both sides of, because in one way I do agree that this was the most substantial match on the show so far. Not just the fact that it was given more time, the work itself did feel just better at certain points than anything else we had seen and weightier. But I really did not like the way this match was structured or booked. Like, first off, at the start of this match, Dave Prazak's on commentary. He says Eric Stevens is, quote, on a tear. And I just want to recap Eric Stevens' entire ROH run so far. He squashed ROH students on both nights of the WrestleMania weekend shows. He wins a 4-corner match at This Means War 2, and Austin Aries is so impressed with him there, he recruits Stevens into his new stable, and they wrestled the No Remorse Corps in a 6-man elimination tag later that night. Aries' team loses, and Stevens is the first person eliminated, but he looked very good in that match before he lost. So far I'd say, okay, he's off to a pretty good start. Then he replaces injured Mark Briscoe in a Steen and Generico versus Briscoe's match, and he gets attacked by the No Remorse Corps in the middle of the match, so he can't even finish it, and Mark returns and takes the spot. Then Stevens loses a 4-way. Then he goes to a 15-minute time limit draw with Christopher Daniels in Daniels' farewell match, where he basically tells Stevens to leave after, and Stevens just leaves without arguing and takes it like a punk. Then Stevens loses another 6-man tag to the No Remorse Corps. Then he loses to Davey Richards. Then Matt Cross, and Delirious beat the No Remorse Corps. Then he loses another 4-way. and then he loses a tag catch to the no remorse score. Then he loses a 6-man to the no remorse score, and then that takes us to this night where he loses. That is the opposite of a tear. That is a glued, very well mended piece of paper. There's no tear there. In fact, Lenny Leonard immediately after, like, I felt like Lenny realized that Dave was saying was wrong, because Lenny immediately after Dave says that, Lenny brings up that, oh, Stevens won FIP's Southern Heritage title, because that's actually like the only kayfabe accomplishment he's had, and it's not in Ring of Honor this year. So, now, Stevens will start getting some wins with the next show after this one, and to build him up for a title shot against Morishima. Then he'll lose a bunch again. Then he'll beat Roddy, Bryan Danielson, and Austin Aries back to back to back. And this is another great example of another booking philosophy various bookers have had, but especially Gabe, which is, oh, I can job someone a lot, and once I decide to flick the switch on their push, it'll be done so strongly that it'll erase everything that comes before it. And
I mean, Tony Khan kind of has that in him as well.
Exactly. In fact, like, people talk about how sometimes, Tony really likes a new guy coming into AEW when they start out losing every match, which is just a weird way to, like, oh, that means he'll push him eventually. And that's such a weird way for me to do it. I will say, sometimes when guys, including Gabe, have done I'm going to make you lose a lot, but I'm going to flick the switch and then push you really strong. Sometimes that does work, and it does.
But I would not say there's any evidence that it works most of the time.
No, just because it works sometimes it doesn't work, and I feel like for every time it works, there's at least one other time, if not two or more times, where you've jobbed a guy out too long, and people are like, whatever, I'm not invested for them, or I see them too much as a certain level guy or of a loser, and I'm not going to buy into them. And it's just, sometimes when you say, I'm going to have a guy lose 6 times before he wins the big one, that really does make the 7th win. I did it again. Oh my God, 6-7. Oh my! Why don't I pick a different number? Holy shit! Anyway, I swear to God, on my life, I did not purposely pick those 2 numbers. Okay, sometimes
I think not only did you purposely pick them, I think that it was you that created the whole meme.
Sometimes, if a guy loses 7 times and they win the 8th, it really is like bigger because they lost 7 times in a row. But sometimes I feel like if a guy loses 7 times and then wins the 8th, people don't go, oh, he won the big one. They go, well, yeah, if you give anyone 8 shots at something, they're going to get it right once. But anyway, even adding all to that, I don't even like the way Aries treats Stevens and Cross. He treats them like they're his young boys. Like, you watched that promo earlier tonight, and I realize, like, in a sense, they are rookies in Ring of Honor compared to him, but it just comes off again, combined with the losing. Maybe if they weren't losing, that would work, but combined with the losing, it's all so bad. Like, I was just thinking, like, the resilience is getting that Gabe booking of they're going to lose a lot, but eventually they're going to win big in the end. Except, spoiler, they don't even really win that big in the end. The stable ends with Aries, who tonight talked about not giving up. Basically, he gets to a show and he's like, yeah, I'm going to shut this down to focus on my own career. Sorry, guys. And like there's nothing resilient about them. And Stevens is kind of over on this night after all that booking I just described. And granted, everyone on the show I feel like has been over so far on this night.
But also Stevens is over because his performances have been good, which is the one thing you can definitely get in ROH, which is like the crowds care more about the performances than the win-loss record, and you can get over losing if you have great matches. And not that Stevens has mostly had like great matches, but I think we've consistently said he's been good, so that's helped.
Yeah, and they're choo-chooing him here as soon as he makes his entrance. When you talked about how they did a dueling chant, one of the rare ones on the show, they're going, let's go hero, let's go choo-choo. So as to the match itself, my issues, that infected my enjoyment of the match, but I had issues in the match itself. This is where I really agree with you. I really like Hero's act, and it's getting very over. Here it's about as over it's ever been. And it's been really cool to see him realize stuff as he's kept doing it. Like, for example, I think he's realized on recent shows that instead he used to sprinkle his ridiculous show building flips and kip ups throughout the match, but now it seems like more often he knows if I do them all in a row for like a minute straight, it gets an even crazier reaction because it's so ridiculous if I don't spread them out. And I like here he does all that, and I like how Stevens just calmly waited for him to do like this minute plus of insanity, and then Hero gets back in the ring and he just immediately runs over him. And I thought, okay, that made the Eric Stevens look cool. More of that, where he's just like, I'm gonna be a step ahead of this guy. Okay, be a goof, and then I'm just gonna kick your ass. But at the same time, yeah, Hero shtick in some situations is starting to wear a little on me because I remember when I was young reading message board threads about Ric Flair doing the same pattern match, and there was this argument that was fine, good even, against limited to average opponents because the Ric Flair patterned match was always good against opponents. And so if it's a guy that's normally kind of average or not good, a good medium average patterned Flair match was a big win to get that out of someone like that. But the argument was always that when Flair was wrestling someone great, he'd still do the patterned match. So often when he was against someone that actually had the talent to do something, they could have tried something different. They could have, and that's kind of how I feel at this point about Hero's current gimmick, where I think it's a lot of fun, the gimmick. It can really jazz up some throwaway tag or multi-man that I don't really care a lot about. But occasionally Hero's in a position where I think, oh, on paper, this is a really good match. And then he just lets the shtick largely consume it. And I think this match is an example of that, where you see sequences in this match where I see kind of what you saw, where, oh, these guys can be really good together. But then there's just so much of the Hero shtick that it overwhelmed it, where I never really got into the flow of them having a good match. It was just too much. And I like the Hero stuff, but it was like a match where I was like, man, this show really needed at this point a really banger, good, straight up wrestling match. And it's just so much the Chris Hero parade when I know you two, you're showing in little moments that you could have a really good match, you two. And but at the same time, if I was Hero at this time in his career, I might have done the same thing. I can't blame him. It's getting very over. It fits him as a heel. It makes him stand apart from everyone else on the card because no one else in Ring of Honor has an act like this at this point. But I was just like, it does, distract from the match with the dog and pony show. Like there's even a moment in this match where they're wrestling and the crowd's busy chanting for Bobby Dempsey and paying attention to him because he's like working with a piece of Tank Toland's gym equipment on the floor. And that's just, again, if this is like a boring four-way or something, God bless you. I love that. Sweeten up the match however you can. But in a match like this, I was like, come on, we've seen this a lot. And I got to end by saying, on top of all of that, I feel like this match continues another trend, which is Eric Stevens is selling too much and on defense too much in his matches. I keep saying he's one of the bigger guys on this roster at this point. He has good physical presence, and to me, he's been most impressive when he's gone on these runs of fast, hard-hitting offense and just looked like a real beast of an ass kicker. But so many of his matches so far have been like this one, where there are a lot of moments in this match where it looks like Stevens is going to get on this run of offense, but instead of hitting, say, 5 moves in a row, he gets cut off after 2 or 3. There are multiple strike exchanges that he has against Hero in this match that he just outright loses in a fair fist fight to goofball 2007 Chris Hero. Then there's this moment, not young knockout king Chris Hero, that would come later. There's this moment in the match where after Eric takes this beating, you can see him start to hulk up and psych himself up. You can kind of feel the energy in the building start to build with him, and he starts another strike exchange with Hero, and he just loses the strike exchange. And then he hits a TKO or something 26 seconds later out of nowhere. It's just, this match to me had a very unsatisfying kind of cadence to it. And then you mentioned the finish, which has one of my least favorite tropes, which is the ref pulling the ref out, the manager pulling the ref out of the ring as they are making a 2 count, and the ref having no way to deny that he doesn't know what happened and not doing anything. And then you get the whole thing you described, the dog and pony show, where Stevens chases the entire Sweeney entourage around the ring into the ring, which was funny. It was a funny visual. And then you get the cheap Hero just catches a distracted Stevens out of nowhere with the Hero's welcome for the win. Which again, in a way, I guess it protects him, but on top of everything I've talked about tonight with Stevens, I felt like it made him look like more of a loser again. I don't know. The work here was probably above average. In a vacuum, if this was my 1st or 5th time seeing Heroes act, I wasn't already grumpy about how Eric Stevens was being booked, I probably would like this significantly more. I probably would have been more on par with you. But this just hit so many wrong notes to me. It just made me really grumpy. Chris Hero does a crooked figure four into a pin while his legs were tied together with Stevens. I thought that was cool. So with all that being said, I swear I don't have more thoughts than that on any other match. On the way out, Sweeney says 50,000 Chris Hero fans can't be wrong. Stevens is left alone in the ring, where he does get a round of applause and a few choo-choos. So you know what? For all my belly aching on this night, fans still liked him even after the loss. We go backstage where Delirious cuts a promo about the Race to the Top tournament in Delirious Ease. He blows a raspberry after he says Olay. And that brings us to the FIP World Heavyweight title four-way fray match. Roderick Strong successfully defended the title when he defeated Austin Aries, Gran Akuma, and Jimmy Rave in 9:37. Strong, Akuma, and Rave eliminated Aries in 5 minutes 12 seconds when they triple pinned him. Jimmy Rave eliminated Gran Akuma in 6:39 when he made him tap out to the heel hook. And Roderick Strong eliminated Jimmy Rave in 9:37 when he made him tap out to the stronghold. If you need a reminder of what a FIP four-way fray is, it's an elimination match with no tags. So all four wrestlers are in the ring fighting at the same time, or in this case, sometimes at ringside. This is Aries' in-ring return to ROH after his brief absence. He's just full of piss and vinegar on this night, yelling it up. He gets a welcome back chant and a big reaction in general. But he's also able, he does the CM Punk thing where even on a night where he is beloved, he finds the one fan. I mean, this wasn't really on him. Punk would actually look for the fans that did this. Aries just ended up near the guy who would do this, the one fan that hates him in the crowd, because some fan is telling Aries that he sucks when he's at ringside, and Aries says something about big clits, which I presume he's like, yeah, I suck big clits. And this is such an Austin Aries dumb jock wrestler thing to do, because I feel like every wrestler, when someone gets told, like, you do this, their immediate, like, split second, don't even have to think about reaction is, yeah, I do this with your mother. Like, I swear to God, if a wrestler got told, like, you suck shit, to go, yeah, I sucked your mother's shit last night. Like they just think about it immediately. Like, yeah, I suck your mom's big clit. Like,
yeah, sex with the heckler's mother is the go-to. And I don't know, if someone said that to me, I'd be like, all right, well, sucks for you then, you know.
Yeah. So first half of this match I felt like was a scramble to the second power. It was scramble squared. It was so scrambly, too scrambly for me. I think a spot that summed up how scrambly this fray was at one point Aries is going for the heat-seeking missile tope on Strong, but Akuma is selling in the middle of the ring from a different spot, so Aries mid-run has to jump over Akuma's body, which means by the time he gets to the ropes, he realizes he doesn't have enough momentum to safely do the tope. Now, to Aries' credit, he does an immediate audible and does a different dive where he just throws himself over the top rope, and it was a very good audible.
Yeah, he does like a corkscrew. I wasn't sure if that was a real pivot or a planned spot, but I guess you're right. It probably was just a pivot.
But it just felt like that's how part of this match at least was, where it was like this match was a reminder why fireworks shows, except for the very end, fire fireworks one at a time instead of all at once, because there was a minute or two early on where I was like, you guys just need to, you're doing too much even for a scramble. But then when Roddy and Rave just take a long powder on the floor, which is a thing I often hate in multi-man matches, I was happy because we got to see a pretty good little Akuma and Aries extended exchange here, where surprisingly Gran Akuma got most of the offense. I was kind of shocked by that. And then Aries is the first to be eliminated, where they did protect him with the triple pin. And from commentary, you can tell the whole point of it is to be shocking. The idea that, oh, this was Aries' first match back, and who could have guessed he'd be the first to be eliminated in a four-way with these four guys. But it continues to make the Resilience look like such geeks, where Aries gives his team this big pep talk about how he's back. This is on my first night back. You know, it's all going to change now that I'm back. And right after that, all three members of his stable lose tonight again. And also, the Resilience continues to be an awful name for a team, even though it fits them now. They just lose a lot. Like, maybe they should just be called moral victories or something. Like, resilient is the worst compliment you could ever earn when you think about it, because it is a good trait, but it's not a trait you want to have to display too much. Like, I don't want to have to show people I'm resilient. It usually means your life has been awful. You're like your uncle who got hit by a bus when he stumbled from a bar after day drinking, and he just spends all his time whittling. He's resilient. You don't want to be your uncle. Like that is bad news. It's like how I hate the name Avengers for superhero teams. Like, avenging suggests that something bad has already happened. Shouldn't you want to be like the Preventers or something? Like, I guess there is that Marvel team called the Defenders. So actually, that is a
Yeah.
team name I can get behind,
Well,
mostly because
at
it's
least
defending.
at least you finally invented a new superhero group name that someone can use. The new Netflix mega conglomerate can create the Preventers now.
Yeah, absolutely. I will watch. That'll be the only superhero thing I'm still willing to watch in the year of our Lord 2025. I had to think for a second to remember what year it is. That's how
It
how it happened in
it
life.
only took you literally the entire year to figure it out.
Just in time to change the calendar. So anyway, after Aries is eliminated, the fans chant bullshit. Aries talks about long clits with a fan. Akuma's eliminated very quickly, and then we actually get what I thought was a pretty fun, fast-paced 3-minute Jimmy Rave Roderick Strong mini match. The crowd even gets behind Rave as a babyface. They're chanting for him. They don't want to see Roddy win. Roddy does a backbreaker that basically starts as a body slam that flips into a backbreaker that I thought looked pretty great. And overall, I'd say this is another match on the show that was, ready for it, a little bit above average on a card that's a little over half over now. And it's been filled with matches like this that haven't been unpleasant, but they have all felt, I would say, slight in different ways.
Yes, slight in different ways. That's fair. I liked your description of this as being too scrambly. That's good. Have you ever felt that way about eggs?
You know what? I sometimes, when I was young, I was so scared about like runny eggs. I would break down a scramble until it was I would assume it was a half a step above egg confetti.
Oy,
So I actually have made where like the curds
that's gross.
the curds are so small. Yeah, it was I was learning how to cook as a teenager, but yes,
Fair.
not since Trevor Dame's 14-year-old eggs have you ever seen a match this too scrambly.
14-year-old egg sounds gross in other ways.
You know what? I had to match you for the roller coaster thing. I'm always
Oh,
about
I didn't
14-year-old
mean it
eggs.
in that way. I meant like that the eggs are really old. Like that's how.
What about
Um,
one of those Chinese 100-year eggs? Those wouldn't be gross. In fact, you could say they're 86 years too young to be delicious.
86 years too young to be delicious. I don't know. I don't know how you could ever incorporate that in life, but one day you'll figure it out because it's a great line. Um, anyway, yeah, I get the idea behind Aries losing quickly, but also clearly not the right move, right? Like it's
Not what this crowd wanted to see.
but also it's like his comeback match. Like let him don't put him in this match if he's gonna lose like that, you know?
Like
Also,
this is the rare time it felt like it's the rare time Gabe's booking ever felt Russonian, which is like, what would Vince Russo do? Oh, they're not going to expect this, so I'll do it. And it's like, you're right, it will be a surprise, but is it a good surprise? You never ask that.
yeah. And then I think after Aries was out, I still think they could have done the rest of the match better. First of all, it was just way too rushed at the end. But also I guess they did Strong versus Rave because those two had been feuding in FIP, according to Lenny Leonard. I wasn't aware. So I guess in that sense it makes sense. But the more interesting matchup definitely would have been Strong versus Gran Akuma, right? Like
Yeah.
Gran Akuma was the most interesting performer in the match. He was doing cool stuff. The crowd was into what he was doing. Rave, we'll talk about Rave in a moment, but he was pretty checked out at this point, obviously. And if they had just given like 5 minutes of Akuma versus Strong, I think that Akuma could have gotten over pretty well there. And so they could have salvaged something out of the match. That said, I do think I liked it a little more than you. It was pretty high energy and enjoyable. But, it was short. The booking was strange. The finish was anticlimactic. Um, so they see like to me they seemed game to have a much better match, but the booking didn't allow it. That's how I felt.
Yeah, yeah, and again, like you were saying about the last stretch being too short, a four-way elimination match going less than 10 minutes. I have no way of knowing this for certain, but it really does feel like Gabe was like 10 matches on the card, everything before we get to the main event. Like even the semi-main event is short. Like it just feels like for some reason on this night he was terrified about a show going too long, and he turns out, if that's the case, way under timing things. So yeah, after the match, we can see Rave is laying on the mat, checking on his ear, and having a really extended conversation with Ref Paul Turner. And if you're wondering why, we'll get into that now, because this was Jimmy Rave's last Ring of Honor match in the Gabe Sapolsky era, which means it'll be the last match of his we talk about on ThROH The Years. He would come back post Gabe for a while. We actually have a lot about this, in part because the newsletters did cover it, but also because Jimmy is one of the rare wrestlers who, from this era of Ring of Honor, that did extensive shoot interviews about his, time in Ring of Honor. So I guess I'll talk about the story. I'll go through the newsletter stuff first, then Jimmy stuff second, then we'll sum up his career, and then we'll move on to the show. But we'll start with the Observer, where Dave Meltzer would write, Jimmy Rave is no longer with ROH after a falling out. He had an argument with owner Kerry Silkin on the UK tour, and contract negotiations that followed weren't smooth. Both sides did agree to a deal, but last week at the show in Deer Park, he went to Silkin and asked for his release. ROH agreed to it, and things actually got worse from there. Gabe Sapolsky is going to continue to use him on FIP shows, but Rave and Sapolsky then had a second split after the first split. The plan had been to turn him babyface. You could see the relationship had changed greatly this year. At the end of last year, he was being groomed for a top singles push as a title contender and having everyone tap out to a new finishing move. The highlight was him beating Homicide right before Homicide won the title, but it didn't seem to really take off, and the big push never really materialized. Vince Russo has been interested in Rave for some time, but TNA couldn't get him because ROH had him under contract. At press time, there is no deal, as Rave, after leaving, has left the country to go on a vacation with his wife. PW Torch would add with this. Jimmy Rave quit ROH after suffering a ruptured eardrum during his match on July 27th, according to multiple reports. One of the reasons Rave quit was because he did not have health coverage as part of the contract he signed with ROH. And yeah, the ruptured eardrum apparently came to him via Grand Akuma. I don't know what spot. And then we'll go to PW Insider next, who wrote, Mike Johnson, there had probably been some issues brewing for a while, but the final straw was at the ROH event in Deer Park, Long Island, last weekend. Rave suffered an ear injury in his match and immediately went to ROH officials demanding to see them as the show was going on. According to numerous sources both in and outside the company, Rave said he was quitting and wanted a release while speaking to two different top officials. It may have been an incident where Rave was hurt and simply lashing out, but there had been a history of him being unhappy in recent months backstage. ROH management decided to drop him from the company at that point. The feeling was that the money invested in Rave could be spent elsewhere and give someone else that wanted to be there a regular undercard spot, possibly putting them under a contract. It is believed the big part of the issue from ROH's end was not because Rave wanted his release, but instead of the way he went about demanding it in the middle of a hot building as they were in the midst of producing a live event. There must have been a lot of heat on Rave for that, as ROH booker Gabe Sapolsky went as far as to drop Rave from ROH's sister promotion Full Impact Pro in Florida, which Sapolsky also books. There was a belief of several wrestlers that it was just a matter of time before the relationship broke down, as it was obvious Rave was hardly the happiest person backstage of late. The decision to let him go wasn't shocking to anyone, as Rave was telling others at the ROH event in Edison, New Jersey this past Saturday that he thought he was about to be dropped. One source who doesn't work for the company believed that the buildup of injuries suffered by Rave in recent months probably added to the entire situation, possibly because Rave wasn't receiving medical insurance as part of his ROH deal. The source went on to state that the ROH deals are one-sided in favor of the promotion, in that they don't guarantee a number of dates for the performers. Of course, the difference between ROH and other groups is that the contracts don't restrict performers from working elsewhere, except perhaps competing TV and pay-per-view entities. So there's a lot there. I guess I should go into Rave's side first. Now, a couple things to note here first, and then we can talk about the story. First off, this is me combining Rave doing an interview with an honorable mention, that podcast we frequently mentioned, friends of the show, with an interview he did with RF Video. There are things he said in one that he didn't say in the other, things he contradicted himself in and contradicted some of the prior reporting you'll see. So I tried to include it all the best I could and so this is not a word for word transcription. This is kind of a recap that I've Frankenstein together to try and use both to fill in the gaps. And also, I guess I just want to make a note, we're not really, apart from a little bit in that reporting I just talked about, getting ROH's side. We're only really getting a really detailed account from Jimmy's side. I still thought it was interesting, so I'm going to lay it out here. This is my recap of what Jimmy said about all the stuff. Jimmy notes that he had just quit his shoot job right before he broke his jaw against Samoa Joe. So as soon as he was starting to solely rely on wrestling for income, he suffered a serious injury. He says he worked with it for 5 weeks so he could blow off the feud with Nigel. I'll note he actually suffered the broken jaw February 17th against Joe, and the Nigel feud ended March 4th. And even counting that he then worked one more match for FIP 6 days later on March 10th, that would only put Jimmy at 3 works working with a broken jaw rather than 5. But to be clear, it's still fucking insane to work 3 weeks with a broken jaw. Jimmy says by the end, his jaw had swelled up so much that even Gabe told him, you have to go to the hospital. Well, he says when he was sitting at home recovering, that's when ROH started offering contracts. That's when they were preparing to go to pay-per-view. Jimmy says his contract negotiations were very difficult. He didn't get along with a member of the office who he names as Sid Eck, or I forget how you pronounce his last name. Jimmy had his own business at one point, so he had access to a lawyer as a result. And so he asked his lawyer to, look over this contract ROH offered me. His lawyer then called ROH and pointed out that the contract didn't really mean anything because the contract didn't guarantee that the contract did guarantee that Jimmy would be paid a certain amount per show he worked, but it didn't guarantee any minimum number of dates. It didn't guarantee that ROH had to book him for any number of shows at all, which made the guaranteed price he would get paid kind of pointless if they don't book him for shows. So at the same time, it was a 2-year deal that contractually prevented him from signing with WWE or TNA for the length of that contract. Yet it technically, again, didn't guarantee him that ROH would have to book him or pay him anything for those 2 years. So, Jimmy and his lawyer were miffed about that, understandably, I'd say. Jimmy also mentions that right before he signed the ROH deal, TNA showed interest in him, as we just read in the reporting, but he reveals that this is the role they had planned for him. It wasn't at first the Rock and Rave Infection team with Lance Hoyt. It was they had just started the Voodoo Kin Mafia, the VKM stable with Road Dogg and Billy Gunn. Everyone remember that amazing bit of booking. And Jimmy says they wanted him to be the X-Pac of that stable, of the Voodoo Kin Mafia. That's amazing. Jimmy says he always also knew that some people had been in ROH less time than him, and they were getting offered more money than he was getting offered in this new deal. And they were getting offered health insurance, which Jimmy wasn't. I didn't transcribe this, but I believe in one of the shoots, Jimmy says that when he went to him about that, they said, well, we thought you were still working your job, so we thought you already had health insurance with your job, so we didn't have to offer you that. Anyway, on honorable mention, Jimmy says that the ROH gave him a counteroffer that he describes as insulting, saying that ROH didn't raise his money per date, but they raised his cut of merch, which Jimmy says was, once again, pointless because ROH didn't make any Jimmy Rave merch at this time. So he would get, he says in like the shoot, 0% of 0 is 0. So, or 25% of 0 is 0. So, he said, but he contradicts himself because on the RF video show interview, he says ROH did eventually up the money, but it still wasn't as much as a friend of his in the company got. And when he asked why, he was told by multiple people in ROH that it was because his friend was a DVD seller and he wasn't. When Rob Feinstein asked Jimmy why, he'll only name Sid as one of the people that apparently he agrees with that Sid was one of the guys who said that to him. Jimmy says he got a lot of heat for getting a lawyer involved. Sid phoned him up and asked him angrily why the fuck he did that. And Jimmy was like, to have a lawyer look over a contract, he was kind of stunned by that. Jimmy says it took forever to negotiate, and he finally talked to Gabe and told him that this deal guaranteed him no dates. And he asked, look, if ROH, for example, runs 40 shows in a year, just guarantee I'll be on at least 20 of those shows so I can at least plan my finances and my year around that. And Gabe at that point just asked him, why can't you take my word? Because haven't I booked you on basically everything so far for years, and I have you booked on everything going forward? And Jimmy goes, I thought about it and I realized, Gabe was right about that. He had taken care of me. In fact, he says there were multiple times before when ROH had to cancel a booking for him where they would either cancel it more than 6 weeks in advance, so he had a lot of time to find a replacement booking, or he says sometimes they would outright pay. They'd say, we have to cancel the booking, but we're going to pay you for the booking anyway. So he said, I've thought about that. I was like, yeah, Gabe's right. He's taking care of me. So he signs the contract. Jimmy says he goes to Japan when he for the Dragon Gate tour and the 2 shows we just covered. When he comes back, Gabe tells him, it sounds like on the day of the show, he's not quite clear, but it sounds like the day of the show, we're going to need to take you off the next 4 shows in a row after this double shot because we're bringing in more Shima and we're bringing in Marufuji. I guess the assumption is because they cost more. Jimmy says, I didn't give a fuck about their money problems. You had just told me you were going to book me on everything, and now you're telling me I have to be pulled off 4 shows. I will note, I looked up just to make sure, Jimmy had worked every show after he missed the 4 shows with the jaw injury since he came back. He, on honorable mention, he says he took not being booked for the pay-per-view, respect his earn, as a slap in the face. But even that show, he works the DVD portion of that show. He's worked every show So I don't know, I guess he was going to be about to be taken off 4 shows. So Jimmy says during this 4-way this night, after he gets told this, Gran Akuma forearms him, ruptures his eardrum. Jimmy mentions that he had been getting injured a lot in ROH in this time period. He broke his jaw against Joe. He got his head open in a split open in a 4-way recently. We talked about, again, where BJ Whitmer buckle bombs him and they bonked heads. He needed 7 stitches for that. He busted this eardrum. And then months before all this, in late 2006, he had that match with Ace Steel, busting him open so badly with a cowbell that he needed surgical staples. Jimmy adds that he also had family problems at home at this time. So he says something that's completely opposite of the reporting, because that reporting I just talked about said that Jimmy, got in trouble with ROH because he insisted on asking for his release in the middle of the show when they were busy and insisted on that, pissed him off. Jimmy's side of it is that when he walked back through the curtain, Gabe and Kerry immediately were checking on him, asking if he was all right. And Jimmy told him, just give me 5 minutes to kind of get my wits about me. And when they wouldn't leave the room, they kept asking if he was all right. He snapped, said, fuck it. And then he asked for his release at that point. So it's completely opposite stories in that sense. He says, I was ready to be done with all of wrestling at that point. Jimmy gets asked at this point, I think by Shane Hagedorn on the honorable mention, if his substance abuse problems were active at this time. Jimmy says he was experimenting with stuff at the end of 2006 because he was going to pain management and getting prescribed pills for his back because his back was so bad at this time that apparently he needed 2 procedures on it during this era, in addition to all the other injuries. He says his drug use then flared up when he was working with the broken jaw. Jimmy says by the time he came back from Japan, he was, quote, definitely bad off, unquote. He says the match with Akuma busted his eardrum in Boston or something. I'll mention that no, that was Deer Park. And then he says he was supposed to wrestle El Generico the next night in the Race to the Top tournament. He wasn't. So again, maybe this is just an example of a wrestler getting a little confused. Jimmy says after asking for his release, he wanted to go to the show the next night, Race to the Top, night 2 in New Jersey. But when he got there, RH told him to go home, but he credited them because they said, we'll pay you for the show, but we don't want you. Go home. Jimmy says that Monday, Gabe called him, says they were going to offer him a release. Jimmy himself describes himself as difficult to deal with in the prior year in ROH and a pain in the ass for them. So even he kind of admits that. Yeah, it's kind of a wild end to Jimmy's run. Matt, I don't know if you have any wider thoughts about that, or if we should just talk about Jimmy Rave's whole career.
I mean, obviously the Jimmy Rave story is very sad. Where you listen to some of that story that you told and you sympathize with Jimmy, like it sounds, you know what I mean? Like he really had been through a lot. He sounds like he was getting kind of dicked around a little bit, but then at the same time, he also admits a lot of his own faults there and calls himself difficult to deal with, talks about his own substance abuse issues. So in that sense, it kind of makes you sympathize with the Gabe and Kerry side about why he might be somebody that's maybe too difficult to have around at this point. So it's kind of hard to really pinpoint like a side to be on in that situation. You know what I mean? Like,
yeah,
it's just like
both sides. Yeah.
Yeah, it's just like it's just a bad situation for everybody. And I don't want to say it was for the best that Jimmy left ROH because in the long run, it maybe wasn't, but it's certainly understandable from all parties why they decided to part ways at that moment.
So I guess my thoughts would be, one thing is, I think ROH, ironically, as they were trying to grow, ended up in a situation like this, having a similar problem that we used to talk about TNA having in the early days of TNA, which is that feeling of they were big enough that they kind of wanted special exclusivity and certain promises and things like that, but they weren't so big that they still wanted that they could be some of these wrestlers' only income. So it's this weird thing where it's like, okay, we want a contract with you that promises you can't jump to WWE or TNA the next 2 years. We want to be able to plan around you guys, but at the same time, we can't offer you any amount that we're going to guarantee you any money. Like, take our word for it that we'll book you. So, they want all the promise and exclusivity in writing from the talent, but they don't feel like they're in a position or willing to offer the financial commitment in return. It's that weird middle ground that you can see getting people mad. Or, we're offering some wrestlers health insurance, but maybe if you're a mid-carder and we think you can get health insurance somewhere else, we want to save some money. It's this weird, they're in this middle ground that happens when a promotion gets too big to be small, too small to be big, and tries to ask for things that maybe they can't totally justify, or I guess in some way they could, because a lot of people said yes to these kind of deals. But I would say that, and I would say the other thing, I guess, is, yeah, I do think it's a side where both sides, probably you read this situation, it sounds like both sides have some share of the blame for this relationship deteriorating. Part of me also wonders if maybe Jimmy was a little more eager to be mad and burn the bridge knowing that TNA was interested in him. I think a lot of us can relate to the idea that you're a little more, you're a little easy, you're a little more likely to quit a job that you're not having a good time at if you know you have another job in your back pocket. So the fact that TNA, he knew they were sniffing around him, maybe it was like, maybe he would have swallowed his tongue, swallowed his pride and bit his tongue and, put up with this stuff, but knowing like, hey, they were interested in me. I could probably get a job there, and he does get a job there. But yeah, so to sum up Jimmy's career, this is kind of difficult because he's one of the rare wrestlers we normally sum up wrestlers' careers when they're done on through the years, but Jimmy's one of the rare wrestlers where he passed away during the run of the show. So we actually have talked about him in kind of a more long scale thing. So I imagine I have said a lot of this before, but I guess to sum up Jimmy, you can go back to, find the first episode we did after Jimmy passed and you'll get a lot of thoughts. But I would say Jimmy was a good talent. And I always think he was underrated by some people and overrated by some people. I am not one of the Southern Graps people who think he's secretly one of the best workers on the planet. I think sometimes he can be so overly minimalist, he gets boring. But I also don't think, I'm also not one of those people that think that Jimmy Rave is a boring wrestler and didn't deserve to be in Ring of Honor. I think he had some really good performances and had some intangibles that other wrestlers had and paid attention to details that some other wrestlers didn't. And I think that he was I think he was brave for, he has said multiple times in interviews his mindset was he didn't want to be a heel that got cheered for doing cool moves, and he tried to take away as many of them as he could when he was a heel. And I think that's a brave move, because that did probably result in what he's talking about when someone in ROH told him, you're not getting paid as much as this other guy because you're not a DVD seller. I think he made that sacrifice. And now, do I think that Jimmy, if he had gone balls to the wall, could have been the spot fest state-of-the-art match guy that a lot of the top-end ROH guys could have? No, but I think, and this came after we rewatched this after he died, when you watch that Homicide match he had in the Fifth Year Festival early in 2007, that is a match where he is working a main event on a major show against Homicide, who's one of the harder workers in the company at that point, in general. And it is a full tilt, spotty kind of all action match. And not only is Jimmy very good in that match, I think he outworks Homicide in that match. So to me, that is the match that beyond all others proves if he had wanted to, he could have been in that world. He made a conscious choice to do less. And I admire him for that. And I also feel kind of bad that it pigeonholed him, but at the same time, going back to what you're saying about, and the other stuff, how we can see both sides of a wrestler, I can see why ROH would also go, well, it's cool that you work this way, but I'm sure Jimmy Rave matches mostly did not sell DVDs. Maybe one or two with Punk, maybe the Nigel fight without honor, but I bet you that's true, but that doesn't mean he wasn't valuable. So it is an interesting career that is sad that he did not. It's sad, obviously, that the way he died was way before his time and that his demons got to him. That's really sad. And it's sad to think that there was probably a world where I don't think Jimmy ever would become a big wrestler if he had persevered. But I think he probably could have got, if you look at the jobs that Christopher Daniels and even BJ Whitmer had before he blew it up with his awful actions had with AEW, I bet you there's a world where, knowing how Jimmy thought about wrestling, he probably could have made a full-time living being like a respected road agent for Ring of Honor. I mean, AEW. And it's sad that he just couldn't hang on a while longer, and get cleaned up.
Yeah, I mean, I think that Rave is in some ways one of the more important wrestlers in this era in terms of like bringing that heelishness to Ring of Honor in the post Feinstein split era, adding that element of like old school, I mean, the act that was the embassy of Jimmy Rave and Nana especially, that's a pretty iconic act. He clearly means a lot to Prince Nana. They definitely, they brought out the Jimmy Rave robe at different moments throughout AEW the past few years. And while Jimmy Rave was not the guy that had the big memorable matches in ROH, you could argue he was the guy that had a lot of the big memorable feuds. Um, the Styles feud, especially the Punk feud, the Generation Next versus the Embassy feud, even some that feud with Nigel that he had, that's all pretty memorable stuff. And certainly once Nana left, that it was harder to sustain the act. But I think he did a pretty remarkable job becoming someone you could take seriously during that late 2006, very beginning of 2007 push. Um, so I do think that where he lacked in the matches, he made up for in the feuds, and that's pretty impressive for a guy in ROH who wasn't having those ROH style matches and wasn't really having top tier promos either. He had Nigel, he had
Yeah.
Nana do the promos for him, but there was just some intangible that he had that allowed him to be this like very over heel that people love to hate. Um, sometimes that embassy stuff went too far for me, especially during the Jade Chung storyline. But I don't know, that Punk feud was pretty iconic, especially, and people really remember the Generation Next feud pretty fondly. So I don't know. I think that in some ways he was more significant than he gets credit for, and yeah, it's sad that it ended the way it did. Both his run in Ring of Honor and, of course, obviously his life.
Yeah, and I guess one other thing I want to say is I feel like the last part of his ROH career in this era is interesting, and where I feel a big mistake they made with him was they took away so much of what made his act great, and they didn't really replace it with anything else. And I always say you can take away something from a wrestler, but if it's working, you can't take it away without replacing it with something. And I feel like obviously the Nana thing that that was a falling out or whatever between that was Nana not wanting to work with ROH for a while, so that was kind of out of ROH's hands. But you lose Nana, who, as you just said, was his mouthpiece, added a lot to him in his act. They got rid of the cool robe, which I think is one of the cooler robes in pro wrestling history. And think of the ground that covers. They banned toilet paper, which was the great crowd participation spot the fans loved. They did give him a new finisher. That the heel hook was decently cool. They gave him the House of the Rising Sun, which I think is a good theme. It was cool. But really, they didn't give him anything else. I think Jimmy is a guy who worked best when he was part of a group, when he had a manager talking for him and emoting for him at ringside, when he had an entourage, when he had tag partners with a lot of charisma. Like I think the short-lived Alex Shelley, Jimmy Rave pairing was really good. I think you took away so much from him, and he needed a person. He needed another wrinkle, something other than just Jimmy Rave, grumpy and serious man. And yet with all of that, this is something I want to ask you. I do feel like we only saw it in a couple of matches, but I feel like there was that first match he came back where he wrestled Michael Elgin, where the crowd gave him a huge babyface reaction the whole night for that match. And I feel like even in a match like on this night where it's down to him and Strong, and the crowd gets behind Rave, like they want him to win, I do feel like there was maybe a little more juice to squeeze. He had a long run by Ring of Honor standards, but when you see the Observer saying that the plan was to push him as a babyface, I do feel like after the Nigel feud and the broken jaw, the crowd did. I do feel like probably some fans did finally be like, okay, I respect you. I'm ready to cheer for you a little bit. The Homicide feud, I think, would have proven to everyone he could have wrestled a more action-y style as a babyface if they needed him to. But it did. You watch this, and it really feels like you look at the booking here. It is very similar to the Homicide booking, where after Homicide lost the world title this year, it was instantly like, oh, Gabe has no ideas and he knows this guy's going. It's weird to me that they signed Rave to a contract, because every match he's had since his return felt like a guy they had no plans for. They weren't even – Gabe normally is good about – even if he's not pushing you, if you're losing, he's still hinting at your next direction. Like look at BJ Whitmer at this point. He's losing every match, but they're doing these backstage segments and they're building, the losses are building towards something. There is nothing since Rave has come back that looked like they're even hinting towards anything about. It looks like they're just playing out the string. So I don't even know. And the fact that Gabe apparently was telling him, I have to take you off 4 shows. I almost wouldn't be surprised if Jimmy might not have lasted even if he had stayed. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, I mean, they probably signed him because of loyalty and stuff, but you're right. And obviously, I said even when we did have that comeback match and got cheered that he could have been turned, but yeah, they just were not interested. They had other things that they had made a bigger priority than Jimmy Rave at this point.
Yeah. Yeah. So anyway, rest in peace, Jimmy. You were cool. And again, Matt, you laid out a lot of the cool stuff, especially at the Punk feud, the cage match at the end, Nigel fight without honor, the homicide match. There's other stuff too. We're not even talking about like the stuff he did on his late life indie runs in the southern U.S., which there was some really good stuff there. NW Wildside, he worked in TNA with Lance Hoyt. I mean, there's stuff to be seen with Jimmy Rave, and he's underrated. It's worth celebrating him a little bit because he's sadly one of those guys that didn't get a big mainstream day in the sun past a short undercard run with TNA. So we then join interviewer Rebecca Bayless backstage for intermission. She says we've seen some amazing matches in the first half. Liar. She's joined by Jack Evans, who takes on Kevin Steen in tournament action tonight. Jack talks about the success that all of the members of Generation Next have had and how all the members achieved that success in the U.S., except him. He had to go to Japan to get his. Now he's back and he wants to earn that recognition stateside. Jack gives us a flash forward. So Jack, after making a Lost reference on a prior episode, now makes the flash forward reference. He says that when he wins the Race to the Top tournament, it's just going to be another member to add to the ROH Hall of Fame. I'll point out that the ROH Hall of Fame didn't start until 2022, and to this day there are only 6 members, which are the inaugural class of Bryan Danielson, Samoa Joe, CM Punk, the Briscoes, and Kerry Silken.
Jack Evans still not great at promos at this point.
And that brings us to a Race to the Top tournament first round match. El Generico defeated Delirious via pinfall in 11 minutes, 19 seconds after he hit a brainbuster. So Matt, another match that on paper has some potential, not necessarily shortchanged on time here. 11 minutes is not bad. What did you think?
At this point, I've decided that these first round matches all seem to be about the wrestlers deciding we're going to showcase the most basic stuff in our arsenal. We're going to do it skillfully, but it's still going to be the most basic stuff, and this is no different. A lot of arm drags on the show, just a lot of arm drags on this show. That said, this was it was fine. Delirious didn't go too over the top with comedy here, which I appreciated. Certainly some. There were a lot of castle pulling and such. But there was just no intensity to it. Even by the end of the match, they did a lot of their big moves. We got Panic Attack, we got Shadows Over Hell, we got a Bizarro Driver, we got 2 consecutive haluva kicks at the end, splash off the top rope. But just the pace was a little bit slower. The intensity was a little bit less than you'd expect from a top match between these guys. This was, I think, probably the least interested the crowd was all night. We even got a dueling "Let's Go Yankees, Let's Go Mets" chant, which I felt bad for the wrestlers during that. And, certainly Generico I hold to pretty high standards. Delirious in this era I don't think has a ton of great matches, but Generico I hold to pretty high standards, and this did not meet them. Pretty disappointing from that perspective. My favorite spot of the match was when after Generico hits an Arabian press on the floor, and and Delirious is against the guardrail. I guess Generico touches somebody's drink in the crowd because he goes "Olé" and throws up his hand, and then he looks up and realizes that he has a can of Pepsi in it. I don't know if that was a tribute to CM Punk or not, but yeah, I'd say this match was professional, solid, 2 entertaining characters, not bad, very disappointing.
This match, and in particular Delirious's performance, felt very by the numbers to me. This match, I would describe it as, it doesn't feel particularly urgent in the way you'd like a match to feel. It doesn't feel like, it's that, they don't work it like it, well, I would say especially Delirious doesn't work it like it's that important. It feels like a house show or, well, an ROHB show match. I would say Delirious, like you said about guys doing their normal stuff like this. Yeah, it felt to me like Delirious was playing his hits, just hitting his signature spots, a tiny bit of comedy stuff like the tassel stuff you mentioned, or, tickling his opponent to get them in position for a submission. But you get, I would say from Delirious especially, you get no more than the hits. And for some reason, I almost got this strange lackadaisical vibe when he was in control. Like he almost kind of meandered around between moves. I think with Generico, you at least got a couple tiny moments that showed one of the reasons that why he was a special talent, and that's that he'd go the extra mile on bumping. He takes two different moves here that you see all the time, and he throws himself into them somewhat literally. Like there's a moment where Delirious is running with Generico. He's going to slam his head into the top turnbuckle, and Generico decides to leave his feet and take the bump. So he's basically flying into the buckle head first with his feet off the ground like a goddamn cartoon character. I thought that was cool. And then later on, Delirious is doing that sequence he always does where he hits a bunch of clotheslines he runs the ropes in all different directions, and his opponent keeps standing for them. And Generico bumps for, sells for all of them. But when the final clothesline comes, to make it seem bigger, he decides to go upside down and basically take a bump for a clothesline that's on his head, neck, and shoulder, almost like almost a dangerous bump for a Delirious clothesline.
Yeah,
so
I mean, Generico's bumps are great. Like the bump that he took with the taking like the lawn darting himself into the turnbuckle when just for that basic head to the turnbuckle spot from Delirious. That was going the extra mile. I will say that.
Yeah. Again, but I will, to support you, those are a couple of moments in an 11-minute match. And most of this was pretty autopilot. But it does shine through that on a night where it felt like most guys weren't giving 100%. There was a couple moments where you saw from Generico where maybe not good for him, but you were at least refreshed to see oh, you didn't have to do that, and you did it. Good for you, except you're probably also risking there's probably a reason why he's had injury troubles in his life. But we also got some wackiness from Generico that I would at least say felt more spontaneous than Delirious's, and I agree with you about one of the fun parts of the match. When Generico does that Arabian press to the floor, did you notice that when he sells it at one point after selling it for a while, he rams his own head against the guardrail out of nowhere on purpose, and then he sells it? I don't know why he did that, but he did. And then he does the thing where he stands up and olays and realizes he's holding a fan's can of Pepsi. And then he throws it down. I thought he kind of threw it down with disgust. I wrote in my notes, subtext, question mark, exclamation mark, exclamation mark. I did like the ending where Generico catches Delirious with a big boot in the center of the ring, and then it stuns Delirious, so he immediately thralls up with two different Olay kicks and a brainbuster and gets the win. Recently on the show, there have been matches that I felt ended kind of suddenly in a bad, anticlimactic way. I felt like this one ended suddenly in a way that felt earned, where Generico catches Delirious with a move. He stuns him, knows this is his big chance, doesn't screw around, hits him with 3 big moves quick in a row, gets the win immediately. And it was a very definitive, emphatic feeling, clean singles win, which I was really happy for Generico to get at this early stage of his ROH career against an established guy, if not a main eventer. And the Long Island RH crowds, I would say, had a bad rep at this time as being one of the worst reacting crowds. I felt like on this night, they were one of the better Long Island area crowds they had ever had. During this match, though, like you said, they do start chanting for the Yankees. But honestly, normally that would irritate me, but I was like, this match was so kind of below its potential. I was kind of like, you know what? They deserve a little bit of Let's Go Yankees. So I would say this was one good wrestler and one great wrestler having a match. I'd rate a strong above average, but again, I can't get mad at anyone that's seeked other ways to amuse themselves during this match, depending on the way they amuse themselves. Don't use that as a license to do something.
We don't want any Joe Gagneys in the crowd here. See, turnabout. It was me to say. It was me to say.
Matt, I love you 15% more now because of that. There are moments in my life where someone does something and I love them a certain marginal more forever, and I love you.
I love you too, man.
So 2 more tournament matches in the main event. Race to the top tournament first round match. Brent Albright defeated Matt Cross via submission in 5 minutes 24 seconds when he made him tap out to the crowbar. The Resilience goes 0-3 on this night, and Cross loses here in 5 minutes. His run in ROH is going so well that the crowd chants, Albright's going to kill you at him before the match starts, I think. So, fun fact, in all of 2007, I double-checked this too, Matt Cross doesn't win a single one-on-one match in Ring of Honor. He wins a 4-way, he wins a 6-way, he's on the winning side of a few tags, but for this entire year, not just up to this point, but for the rest of the year, he doesn't win a singles match. So, also an example of that, I'll book you, job you out, but then make it up for you, except with the Resilience, they don't really make up for it, except with, I guess, Eric Stevens eventually. Cross does get a good amount of offense in the first half of the match, and I will say, for a show that's felt a little meh in different ways, I appreciate that Cross seemed to have that urgent, I'm barely getting any time and I'm going to lose, so I'm going to just try and rush and jam all my cool stuff in stuff. This is a match where I think he does the space flying tiger drop 2 minutes in. He probably just thought, look, I'm 5 minutes on this night. I'm going to fucking do my coolest spot. Albright, I would say, is another guy on the show that was on autopilot on this night. He just does his usual stuff. This is the moment I referenced earlier. It was interesting. He does his usual 3 suplex combo where he does 3 different suplexes different kinds of suplexes in a row, and he always starts with a German. And because it starts with a German and he gets back to his seat, for a brief moment, it looks like he's going to do multiple Germans. And you didn't hear this, I think, during the Davey match, but when he does that, when the crowd thinks for a second he's going to do multiple Germans, you can hear fans start to boo. Like it is a fascinating time capsule in that one respect, that to hear fans being like, we don't want fucking Benoit stuff, okay? We don't want to think about it. Don't even tease it. I guess unless you do it more subtly like Davey Richards does here and not way less subtly like he will do on a future show. Albright doesn't just win this match. He pulls Cross up at 2 on a pin attempt where he could have won, so that he can cockily throw him down into the crowbar and win by submission, which is a spot he's done before, but it's a spot, again, combined with the booking of Cross, that makes Cross, who already doesn't look strong, look like even more of a low-level bottom of the card guy. And then he proceeds to hold the crowbar on way long afterwards, to the point where the match almost feels like it's going to get reversed, and then he forcibly shakes Cross's injured hand as he sells. So all of this, I felt like you just really made Cross look like a jobber. But at this point, it was clear that I think Gabe was kind of already souring on Cross and was seeing a lot more in Brent Albright, which maybe I wouldn't have felt that way, but hey.
Yeah, I mean, these Long Island crowds also really liked Brent Albright. I feel like on the last Long Island show, Albright also got very strong reactions compared to what he would get at other places, babyface reactions. So they could have gone with him as a babyface sooner than they did, I think, especially in the Northeast. They just like their big guys, and Albright was a big guy in ROH, certainly by ROH standards. Like you said, Cross was dynamic here. He did a lot of fun stuff. He got more evidence than I honestly expected him to do. And then, once Albright caught him with the suplexes, it was basically over. So, yeah, not much of a match. Pretty by the numbers. Shortest real match of the tournament, if you're not counting the Whitmer and Primo match. So there's really not too much to say about it other than just the way the two guys were positioned. So yeah, I mean, I didn't hate it or anything, but certainly not a highlight.
And then we get the race to the top first round match, the final match of the first round of the tournament. So I guess you could say this is them positioning this as, it's not the main event of the show, but the main event of the first round. Jack Evans defeated Kevin Steen via pinfall in 9 minutes, 18 seconds after he hit the 630 splash. Again, big kind of interesting matchup. They position it high up on the card, yet it still only gets 9 minutes. Weird choice, but what do you think about this, Matt?
I don't know. If every match of the tournament was like this, I would have been a pretty happy camper. I feel like this was more like it. I mean, it helps that I love Kevin Steen in this era and just what he does. Jack, obviously, is always very entertaining. These are the two guys we talked about as guys that are just always performing every minute in their match. And I feel like they just made every second of this count. First of all, it's the only match of the tournament that really started hot and heavy. With even before the match, Steen tries to mock Jack's breakdancing by just rolling around on the mat, and then Jack does some breakdancing, and Steen just kicks him while he's doing it, which I don't think we've seen that before. And then they go right at it, and Evans yells "old school, baby," and does corner punches that don't last very long. They do a handspring elbow early where that sends both Steen and Evans over the top to the floor, which I liked. Steen immediately does. Tugs at Jack's legs, causing him to fall face first on the apron. Does a running cannonball into Evans against the guardrail. This is all in like the first 2 minutes, which I thought was really good. There is a weird spot where Steen goes in the ring to try to break the count, but there's no count out in ROH, so I don't understand that. But there's a spot where Steen does a backdrop to Evans, and Evans flips all the way over onto a 450 on his stomach. When it finally slows down, Steen is sure to make sure it's entertaining every second as he works Evans over. There's a spot where, like you mentioned, Steen leaning into like the people calling him fat, where the crowd chants "you fat fuck," so he gets on the mat and does some crunches and does a kip up, which I like that. They just keep going doing all their big moves. There's Evans calls for a 630 at one point, which means he definitely won't hit it. And Steen crotches him and goes for a belly to back, but Evans lands on his feet. And the one negative point in the match was when I think he tried to turn that into a reverse Rana, but it's just very messed up. But Steen still takes the bump. And then Evans follows up with a 630 to win the match to probably the biggest pop of the night so far, honestly. I thought this was the best match of the first round of the tournament. Still too short to be anything special, but they just brought way more energy and excitement than any other match. It was the only match where they felt like they were doing more than just the basics. Makes sense to me they would have good chemistry, and they did. I know this is a weird comparison, and I don't know if anyone's ever made it before, but in this match, Steen kind of reminded me almost of like in his prime Randy Savage. I don't know if that sounds like an insane comparison. Does it sound like an insane comparison, Trevor?
I need you to give me some justification.
Well, do you remember that Randy Savage in his prime just basically had everything? He had energy, he had athleticism, he had psychology, he just played his character perfectly. It was just like there was no element of professional wrestling that this guy wasn't excellent at. The only thing that Randy had over Steen is that Randy really looked the part of a superstar wrestler in a way that Steen doesn't. Although I think Steen does look like a big bully and stuff in a way that's good. Like obviously Steen I think is more compared to the great brawling wrestlers, but in a match like this he just really seemed like he just had the whole package together. Like he really was Mr. Wrestling, And and the guy that I think of when I think of that is Randy Savage. That's why it made me think of that. Not that Evans wasn't good in this match, but in this era, Steen is just clicking for me. So I just really thought that he was great.
I agree 100% about maybe only 92% about the Savage comparison. Well, I completely get what you're saying now, but 100% about everything else. Steen and Jack is a battle of two guys who, are performers. Like I mean that in the best sense. I always say this, but those are the two guys in this roster currently that they are their characters and entertaining from the moment they walk through the curtain until the moment they go back. They're interacting with the crowd spontaneously. It's fitting that I say that about them. They both cut promos into like the handheld cam as they walk to the ring. And I bet you they didn't plan that. They just were. Those are the kind of guys those two are. They're just from the second they come around from that curtain, it's like it's time to start entertaining. And this match had, like you kind of said similar, this match had a lot of what I felt like the rest of the show, like it had a lot of what I felt like most of the rest of the show was missing. Mostly that like that certain level of energy. They didn't wrestle this like a B show. It felt like rather than that wrestling this like, oh, we got 9 minutes, let's wrestle this like the 14-minute match we want to do, but with 5 minutes. No, this felt like they were like, okay, we got 9 minutes. Let's make the most of it. Let's go balls to the wall. Let's have some urgency. Let's fucking treat this like a big deal. And they start right from the gate. I think one of the first things that happens in the match is Steen tries to go for his finisher. He tries to go for the package pile driver right away. Jack flips out of it, and we're off to a hot start right away. And it's an example of you can have shorter tournament matches that don't feel like a negative if they're like this. If the wrestlers go, okay, this is what we're being given. How can we work it that fits with what the limited time we're being given? And Also, lately, I've been calling a bunch of matches by the numbers on the show. This is a great example of how easy it is to make something feel not by the numbers, because they do a lot of their usual stuff here, but they do cool little variations on some of it. Like Steen does his cannonball that he usually does to the corner, but this time he does it on the floor with Jack propped up against the barricade. Steen does the senton bomb he normally does, but instead of it doing it to an opponent who's flat on his back like he usually does, Jack's on all fours, which actually makes it look way more deadly. When Jack is doing that tree of woe double stomp, which I normally hate the tree of double stomp moves that wrestlers do because the wrestler has to hold on to the top rope that's taking it for so long. I thought they did this one really well because as Jack is just starting to jump, Steen goes like, no. He just screams no, and then he tries to move to the side, and Jack still hits him. But I love that, like, he didn't just hold on and take it. He actually like made an effort, like, okay, I know I can move a little now and still have him hit it, so I'm going to act like I'm trying to dodge it. I thought so almost no one does that, and he did that. I thought that was such a great moment, and a little attention to detail, and my favorite variation is, you mentioned it, of all their spots they did in this match, was Jack normally does that handspring elbow where he does it to an opponent in the corner and he has the momentum take just him over the top onto standing on the ring apron. And like you mentioned here, instead he has Steen that's basically tied up in the ropes in the middle of the ropes, not in the corner, and he does the same handspring elbow, but the momentum takes them both over at the same time to the floor like a cactus clothesline. And I was like, that's one of those rare examples, and you see that sometimes in wrestling where it's like, I don't know if that's more dangerous or harder to do, probably is, but I watched that and go, that looks so much cooler than your normal version of that move. You should just do that all the time, because that looked 10 times cooler. It's like, why aren't you like, it was just such an awesome little variation. And I also think this match shows how well character can cover up something, because this match's structure is a real hot start full of big moves. It's a real hot end full of big moves. And in the middle, it's short because this whole match is short. There's that little Steen beatdown of Jack that's slower where not much happens between the moves, but you don't really notice the pauses because, like you were saying, every moment where Jack is selling and maybe both are catching their breath, Steen is filling up that space. He's playing to the crowd. He's talking to the camera. He's doing stuff like you mentioned where the crunches when the crowd chants, "You fat fuck." There's a moment where he sells that his hands really hurt. He's kneeling on Jack and he calls the cameraman over to him while he's like kneeling on Jack and leaning on the ropes. And he goes like, "Look at my injured hand." He goes, "Look." And then he pauses. He goes, "Oh yeah, I'm lying." And it's like, he's such an asshole. It's so great. And that's an expert. Like, I feel every match we're rewatching of this run of Kevin Steen, I feel like he got such shit when he's doing so many of the things that the people that gave him shit should love, like the little detail work and the spontaneous moments. Like he's actually should be a guy that's championed by the kind of the really detail oriented, micro-analyzed match reviewers. And it all fits his character too. He's not just doing it for the comedy show. He's doing it because he's being cocky because he's acting as the character of, this match is too easy for me. And I know this because at one point he says, quote, "It's too easy." So I know what he's doing. And I just feel like it's a great example of how one of the great things about wrestling is, unlike mixed martial arts or boxing, where you might see a great round and the next round might be slow as shit and boring because the fighters have to catch their breath and reassess things. In wrestling, you can literally catch your breath and reassess what to do next. And if a wrestler's a really entertaining performer, you don't really notice it because they're so entertaining. They're filling the time and kind of distracting you from what's actually happening. And I think that's one of the magic parts of wrestling.
When you're a true macho man, you can do that.
Exactly. Yeah, that is something Macho could do. Sometimes I review a match where I say a lot of negatives, and then I have to tell you it's not as bad as I make it sound like. This is the opposite. This match isn't quite as good. I just laid out a ton of positive things. It isn't quite as good as I made it sound like. I put this on the border of high good to low very good, like 3.5 to 3 3/4 stars. I had to put a star rating on. Like, it's really fun. It's a sprint that feels substantial, but it still feels like a sprint. It feels like one hell of a snack. It's not quite a meal, but man, it's a great snack. And Jack, like you mentioned, God love him. He has some of his frequent sloppiness here. I would say two. You mentioned one Rana he blew. I would say two of his biggest spots in this match were both variations of Rana's, and each time he got maybe 50% of the Rana. But luckily, they were both wild enough and chaotic enough moves that when Kevin bumped for them, you still kind of accepted and went, well, he definitely screwed that up, but like, I'll move on. So, overall, on a show where I feel like a lot of wrestlers made 50 to 80% of the potential of what they were given, I felt like these two came pretty close to max out the potential of the 9 minutes they got here. And yeah, like you were saying, an emerging story of 2007 ROH is Kevin Steen is bringing so much to this company that it's not like the rest of the company wasn't a good roster doing a lot of fun, good things. Although maybe not on this night, but I feel like so many nights now when we're reviewing shows, we're coming away going, man, he just brought like a freshness that the rest of the card didn't have, like things he's doing.
Yeah, and when we say a freshness, we're talking about like 1989, 90 style, like rap lingo, like he's fresh, he's fly, he's just brings the Fresh Prince of Deer Park.
Well, that would make him comparable to Randy Savage, because Randy Savage, something of a rap artist, something of a rapist himself.
Right. All right, you could have just said rap artist,
He's cut a few tracks.
Yes. Be a man, Trevor, and give Kevin Steen his due as someone like Randy Savage.
I can't be a man. I'm scared. I heard about Macho. That's what I heard. After the match, Jack asks for a handshake, and I love that Kevin actually gives Jack a handshake, even though he's a heel, but he has his fingers crossed behind his back, and then he turns to the camera and he goes, Jack still sucks. And I love it's perfect for this heel where he's a heel, but at this point, he still pals with a babyface. It's the perfect level of heel for him, as opposed to, we talked about earlier, where maybe Seidel's almost like he never kind of crosses that line. Eventually, Steen will get very sinister, but I love at this moment, he's an asshole. Matt Seidel's a heel that shakes hands earnestly. Kevin Steen's an asshole who will shake a hand, but immediately let you know he didn't mean it. Like he's the extra level. So yeah, after the match, Jack leaves. Steen actually gets mostly chants for him, but some boos and jeers. Next, before the main event, we get the first in something we haven't seen in a long while, which is an ad for an FIP DVD on ROH show.
From December of 2006, which by the time this DVD actually came out, had to be like 8 to 9 months earlier, or at least 7. Yeah.
They hyped the Black Market and the Heartbreak Express facing off in the Cage of Pain, which I imagine is less bad than the Cage of Death. But like, it's funny when another promotion has the Cage of Death, you're like, the Cage of Pain.
Well, it's actually a few levels below. It's not even like the Cage of Injury. Yeah. It's just the Cage of Pain.
The Cage of Moderate Discomfort. But this show apparently also featured Roderick Strong defending the FIP World title against Steve Madison, and Bryan Danielson taking on Davey Richards. FIP, Cage of Pain, in stores now. It's non-stores. Don't look for it. Well, maybe it's in a thrift store somewhere. That'd be a cool find. If I found that in a thrift store, I would buy it, but otherwise, probably not. And that brings us to the main event, non-tournament action. The ROH World Tag Team titles were on the line, and the Briscoes of Jay and Mark Briscoe successfully defended the titles when they defeated Bryan Danielson and Nigel McGuinness in 17 minutes, 50 seconds, when Mark pinned Nigel after Bryan accidentally hit him with an elbow. So on a night full of them, we go back to one more of Gabe's Sapolsky's classic booking tropes, and this one would be, how do you pad out a really often thin tag team division? You throw 2 single stars together for a random title challenge. Now, I guess I will say, Danielson and Nigel had teamed in a whopping 1 match before this, and that match was like an admittedly fairly big win where they beat Morishima and Marufuji, and I guess that's the entire justification why they get this tag title shot. It was funny to hear Dave Prazak on commentary talk about how he was like, can 2 single stars beat the tag team champions? And I think longtime ROH viewers by this point had seen that question asked about 800 times in matches, and the answer was almost always no, they can't. So like, it wasn't as urgent a question as Dave was making it sound like. I think the biggest appeal of this match to me was the novelty of how it was worked, because which I don't think would be a novelty at all to anyone that hadn't been watching a lot of Briscoes matches in the 2006 2007 era, because without that context I think you would watch this match and just go, it's a fairly good standard tag. But if you know that almost every Briscoes tag match in ROH in this era was wrestled 50-50, constant your move my move, back and forth with a ton of momentum swings, then this match would be more of a novelty to you, because this is a match where the Briscoes' opponents are on offense the majority of the match. I would say that maybe their opponents take 75% of this match, and they almost eat them up a little bit. And to me, it was extra interesting just because it was a novelty for me. For that's rewatching all these shows, it's kind of crazy to see stuff like at one point in this match, Jay is selling on the mat, and Danielson's just yelling at him, and he goes, "Man up, Jay," and he slaps Jay, and Jay doesn't fire up. He just sits there and takes it. And I'm like, I don't know how many times I've ever seen Jay in this era ever like just get owned like that and just, take it and sell that big, where it's like, I can't even fight back. I can't fire up. This guy's kicking my ass. And yeah, this is the rare Briscoes match of this era where they're a little dominated. And one other thing I really liked about the Nigel and Bryan versus Morishima and Marufuji match was there was no miscommunication. There was no can they coexist stuff that's so overdone in modern wrestling. They worked together very well, and until the finish, that trend continued in this match. Like, in fact, I feel like in some ways Bryan and Nigel in this match almost put some regular tag teams to shame, because in their whopping second match as a team, they showed more teamwork, I felt like, than some dedicated tag teams I've seen. Like Bryan's preemptively cutting off the illegal Briscoe when Nigel's making a cover. Bryan at one point directs traffic, and you can hear him tell Nigel while he has a Briscoe in the Romero special, like, go give him a drop, get in the ring. And Nigel does it, and it's funny because it's not a horrible drop kick, but you can tell it's not clean, like it's not something that Nigel McGuinness is used to doing. And it's a funny thing because I've always wondered, like, when wrestlers are calling things, occasionally they call moves for the other guy. And I was always thinking, what would you do as a wrestler if your opponent calls for a move for you and it's like a move you don't do? Because I've never seen Nigel do a running drop kick to a guy that's like basically seated on the mat. And he, to his credit, he does it. He's like, I guess I'll do it. And there's a cool spot where the Briscoes have Bryan up for the Doomsday Device, and Nigel gets behind Jay and he pushes him forward, so Bryan falls off of Jay's shoulders, and Bryan starts to and then at the same time Mark is jumping off to the flying clothesline, and Bryan starts to grab Mark's arm in the air so he can like control him and lock him down in the cat of mutilation, which I thought was a really cool moment. So really, Nigel and Bryan control the middle so much. It's only the final 2 or 3 minutes where the Briscoes have Nigel isolated while Bryan is selling on the floor, where it really starts to feel like the Briscoes got on a roll with some real big sustained offense. Although we still got some Briscoes offense from earlier, and even stuff like they switched up their double tackle because Bryan ducks it, and then they hit him with a double Uranagi, which was cool. But then we get the end. Nigel loses because Bryan accidentally hits him with an elbow and leads to the immediate pin. And it is the kind of odd couple feuding partners miscommunication spot. I do think it can be a good spot if done occasionally, but I just think it's so overdone in wrestling, and I've seen it so often in my life. I have grown a fair bit of distaste for it, but I will give credit that they set this up by having Bryan and Nigel earn this match by winning a previous match where they worked really well together as a team. And they had them work really great together in this match until the one spot at the very end. They didn't squabble throughout these 2 matches and suck the fun and oxygen out of them. They didn't make the matches all about them, not liking each other. They made it about the wrestling. So I'd say I tolerated this finish like a mom tolerates their kid staying up an extra half an hour because their kid got all their homework done early, where it's like, I'm not thrilled it's happening, but you did kind of earn it, so I have to kind of give you this. So I would sum up by saying this was not a B level effort match on a show full of B level effort matches. I would say this was like a B plus level effort match, which normally makes me happy on shows. But by this point in the show, I was kind of hoping for a home run to kick this whole event up a notch. I was hoping I would probably give this a 3 3/4 stars, like almost 4. I was kind of hoping for that 4 stars plus. It's just a tiny bit below it, but I would say this is one of the only matches of the show I did not come away going, I wish I saw the last 2 matches, the only 2 matches on the show where I was like, I wish I saw a bit more from them. It is, one of the rare matches on the show that even though the crowd was chanting all night long, it did get "This is awesome" chants. but it's also a match where I felt like they probably could have gone 3 or 4 minutes. I felt this was one of those matches where it was just starting to hit that top gear where I was like, if you held this for 3 more minutes at this new level, it's going to be 4+, maybe even above 4. And instead they kind of wrap it up pretty quickly once they get to that level. But still, I'm happy for this match on its own. I wish it was a little more to kind of save the show.
I probably like this a little bit more than you. I would go at least 4, maybe 4.25. Um, I thought it was a lot of fun. I really thought. I mean, Danielson is so good. The fact that like he was so clearly like such a great tag team wrestler, and when he doesn't do it that often, just the wherewithal to like always be knocking the Briscoe off the apron when Nigel had the other Briscoe in like a predicament. To do that so consistently when a lot of other wrestlers, even veteran tag wrestlers, are kind of like inconsistent with it. Just like that little aspect of it. It's like, okay, he has this attention to detail that no one else has. That reversal into the cattle mutilation on the Doomsday device was so awesome. And then the spot immediately after where he goes into the elbows and goes back to the cattle mutilation. He just works it so well. I think Nigel had a really good match here, timing his clotheslines well and all of his other offense. And the Briscoes played their part really well as like the baby faces working from underneath and making the big comeback. The stuff that took it down a little bit for me was you mentioned that like they didn't make it over the top with the Danielson and McGuinness having like, their can they coexist miscommunication spots. And you're right, they didn't, which is why I liked the match. But there was a little more of it than I would have liked. Like at the beginning when Danielson in the intro tells Bobby Cruz to say, and the next ROH World Champion, it's just like, oh, come on, you're going for the tag team titles. Like just make that seem like your priority here, even though I know like the idea is that Danielson is out for himself. And then there was that spot where McGuinness is getting worked over. And Danielson says to him from the apron, "Do you need me to take care of this, Nigel?" Before Nigel like reluctantly tags him in. Though that I felt like it was good character work, but not necessary. And then the finish, I'm with you on the finish. Like I kind of have a knee-jerk distaste for it, but I think I would have liked it a little bit better if Lenny Leonard hadn't been like, "Did he do it on purpose?" Because like then that
I really didn't like that.
Yeah, that adds this element of like, okay, then that's like, Russo-rific stuff in a way that wasn't needed. Just have it be an accident. It was clearly worked like an accident, so just have it be an accident. But like the match itself was so well worked. The crowd was so into it. It was so excited. So I think it was a low grade. Certainly not a match of the year or anything, but I really, really, really liked it. I thought it was exciting, intense, good heat. I would love to see these two teams wrestle without the Danielson shenanigans, but I don't think it ever happens. So yeah, good match with a finish I didn't love. And definitely the match of the night.
Yeah, and I am 100% again with you on that and I'm a big Lenny Leonard fan, but I thought that was maybe he was told to say that, but if he wasn't, I felt like such a rare off moment for him where he did the all, did Brian elbow Nigel on purpose, because he clearly didn't, and that is such a dumb question to ask, because that's exactly why I hate this feuding partners trope. Why would someone accept a match with a guy, work together for perfectly well for almost 18 minutes, and only then when they were possibly on the verge of winning fucking titles, intentionally hit their partner? Like the idea that a commentator that we're supposed to respect would be like, did he do that on purpose? Like why? Like why would they ever do that? I just it's one of those things that I just it makes it stupid. An approach could go either one of two ways. Either a wrestler can really have meant to do that, in which case that promotion's booking is stupid, or the announcer can say it, but the wrestler didn't mean to do it, in which case the announcer is kind of not doing a good job. But anyway, after that, Brian does shake the Briscoe's hands, but then he goes to Nigel and he gives him the old, I would describe it as the hooey to you hand gesture before storming away in disgust. And the show ends with the Briscoes celebrating at ringside for a minute, and we get another rarity for ROH DVDs in this era, which is no end of show backstage promos, which again, the show felt like it was rushing things, and you would think you try to sell DVDs, why not have a few promos cut backstage, a few wrestlers have cut backstage promos hyping up their second round matches that will be on the next DVD.
Or at least a graphic showing the brackets, like this tournament was done very lazily, in my opinion.
Yeah, and again, ROH DVDs at this point had room on the disc for like 3 hours 15 or something. This was a 2-hour 41-minute thing. They had plenty of time for spend a few more minutes on a match, spend a few more minutes, giving us a couple more promos or anything. But that brings us to the end of this show. Matt, who won the Matt F Trophy?
One of the most macho winners of this trophy that I can remember. I'm giving it to Kevin Steen. I just love what he's doing in this period. Like, I just think he's just so on point with everything, and he made his match so entertaining. Oh, he got help from Jack Evans, but I'm just really, really impressed with him. I think he's going to be winning that trophy a lot.
Yeah, by the time this is over, it's going to be like how Dave had to name the best technical wrestler award in The Observer, the Bryan Danielson Best Technical Award. It's the Kevin Steen Best I Can Do Some Stomach Crunches. Best the
Kevin S Trophy.
Yeah, the Kevin Steen Matt F Trophy. That's a good name. Real rolls off the tongue. But so yeah, this show, it's you know what? It's like so many B shows. Ring of Honor had a high floor at this point. Almost everything here was at least watchable, and I would say the last two matches, very good. I would say if most of the rest of the show was like the quality of the last two matches, I'd be very happy with the show. But I feel like we have seen other shows that have kind of had this quality to them, at this level of quality, and also felt kind of held back by B show, like a B show sometimes is. But I think the difference is I had higher expectations for this show because I think on paper this card looked really good, and there were so many matches on the show where I was like, that didn't get enough time. They didn't seem to put as much effort or as much passion into it, and in a way, I almost rate this lower than some shows that probably are a little bit worse than this, just because my expectations were higher. It was not a bad show. I had a perfectly enjoyable time watching it, but most matches I ended by just saying, oh, I was hoping that would have been a little bit better, but it was okay.
What's funny is I agree with you, but at the same time, like, maybe it's because the crowd was hot. Maybe it's because we're comparing it to the last show we watched, which was just such like a nothing show. This show was pretty entertaining. Like, even though the matches weren't great, like it was a fun showcase of like a lot of, like, they've had a lot of people on this show. It was a fun showcase of like the diversity of the roster, not ethnic diversity, by the way, one of the least ethnically diverse rosters you'll ever see in your life. But to the point where it's like kind of alarming, actually. But like, just like the different characters and stuff. So I found the show more enjoyable than the match quality would have you think. And the last two matches were good. But yeah, not like by objective standards, not a particularly good show. But I did have a good time watching it.
And that brings us to plugs. So, as always, if you want to contact us, it's ThROH@gmail.com, THROH for through. We got very nice email recently where we got our first ever piece of fan art. Someone, after I had talked about Bryan Danielson, how ridiculous he looked wearing his getup that he did at the Live in Tokyo show, wearing the khaki shorts with just the weird outfit. Someone literally drew a cartoon Bryan Danielson wearing that, which was, I'm in awe of anyone that knows how to draw anything. So that was very, very enjoyed and very much appreciated. At Trevor Dame on Twitter, at Mayor MGF on Twitter. We're also on Blue Sky under the same things. I'm running out of steam, Matt. I am late for eating. I haven't eaten today. So Blue Sky, similar names. Next time on the show, we will be covering the dramatic pulse-pounding conclusion to the Race to the Top tournament. Race to the Top, Night 2. Jimmy Rave is gone, but there will still be action. There will be the last 3 rounds, and Claudio going to wrestle a lot. El Generico going to wrestle a lot. That's usually a good thing. Plus, Danielson, Aries, and others will be involved in a big old tag match where I think like $10,000 on the line. Clearly, that's where Tony Khan got his idea to do so many money matches. Not all the generations of historical territory wrestling that did that step that preceded this, but this specific match on a somewhat unremembered show for ROH. But we will talk about all that then. Sure, there'll be lots of fun stuff to talk about. So until then, have a happy holidays. Until then,
drink some beer and have a happy holidays.
Have a happy holidays. Have a hot chocolate. Till then, have a good time. Have a great time.